Ash finally understood the source of the unease that had been gnawing at him since the moment he entered the land of Forge. The mind demon was somehow attempting to control him but failing. That lingering attempt, that constant invisible pressure, was the reason the discomfort never went away. He was certain that both he and Snow were unaffected by whatever method the demon was using to control the crowd. The various effects of his runes must have been shielding them. That explained why his instincts had been blaring warning sirens in his head from the start, why there had been a constant weight on his chest, and why he felt far more at ease within his own soul space. Does that mean he is watching me right now? Didn't the old man say he's everywhere before dying? Was this what he meant? Ash didn't know what to do. His knowledge of the world, and of the novel's events, was failing him. Never had he read about any demonic heart appearing in the Elven continent, nor had there been any mention of a mind-controlling demon in Dwarven territory. Yes, there was a mind-controlling demon he knew of, one of the 7 overlord demons, Lilith, who always stayed close to the demon prince. She was terrifying indeed, but she was not as omnipresent as whatever he was feeling now. But what are the chances? Maybe it is that enchantress. She could just be trying to play mind games with me, to make me feel despair and force me to give up. Isn't she quite skilled at that? There was also a chance that this was not Lilith at all, but someone else entirely. If that was the case, then he had no idea how to deal with them. Still, after his earlier interaction with the dwarf soldier, he was at least 60% certain that not all of them are under control, because if Ash were the demon, and a person immune to his mind control walked into his territory, the very first thing he would do is eliminate that person. Even in the novel, Lilith had gone after Ray the moment she realized he was free from her charm. There was another reason for his conclusion. If everyone was under control, then there was no reason to throw him into a prison cell. The demon could have simply commanded the entire city to attack him at once, and Ash would have been killed, at least according to the demon's logic. But nothing like that had happened, which meant not everyone was under control. Still, he was missing something. He was lacking information, and there was only one way to obtain it. More experiments. There was no other choice. If Ash wanted answers, he would have to find a way to save someone from the demon's control without them dying in the process. Something that could only be achieved through repeated trial and error. That was exactly what he set out to do. Removing his cuffs, he moved to another cell. This time, he used Snow's X-ray vision to examine the dwarf inside. Yet even through that, nothing unusual was visible. Having no other option, Ash decided to infuse life mana directly into the dwarf's skull, as it was always the head that exploded. He also activated a noise-canceling artifact, just in case. The moment the mana flowed into the brain, the reaction was the same. Terror filled the dwarf's eyes, his pale face trembling as he stared at Ash. His voice shook with pure fear. He's everywhere. Die, everyone will die. There is no escaping it. He knows about you, you will die, everyone will die. Run, run, run. Central City, run. This time, however, the dwarf survived a little longer before his heart suddenly burst apart instead. Even so, Ash had gained something valuable from the attempt. So, he knows about me. And Central City? Is the demon really that far away? How can such long-distance control even exist? Wait? Ash's eyes widened as a chilling possibility formed in his mind. Don't tell me it's a mind-controlling monster or something. Something that links and controls all the hosts at once. The thought was disturbing to say the least, but for now it was nothing more than a possibility. That only made him more serious. He had studied about creatures known as mind flayers before, dangerous beings capable of controlling multiple individuals without much effort. The only way to kill one was to destroy its main consciousness. But still at the end it was only a possibility. I will try asking the people this time. Ash decided to change his approach. This time, instead of only observing, he would infuse life mana into criminals and immediately question them before they could say anything else. And that was what he did. Unfortunately, his luck was poor. Some of the prisoners died before even uttering a single word, while those who tried to answer were already too late. Their bodies failed before the words could leave their mouths. All in all, he gained no new information. But it was not as if there was no progress at all. After 30 people had died in the prison area where he was being held, Ash reached a conclusion. It's not mind control. Yes, he was now certain of it. Mind control involved things like memory wiping, hypnosis, and manipulation. But even when Ash directed life mana toward their hearts, he could feel that demonic, or perhaps even more sinister, presence inside them just moments before either the heart or brain exploded. This meant there was something physically inside the bodies of these people, like a parasite or insect, responsible for their deaths. Yet even with that conclusion, Ash had still not been able to locate this parasite, much less find a cure for it. Still, it pointed him toward a possible method by which the dreadful demon was controlling its victims. Either the food source or the water. Mainly water, I think. After all, the water source in a city is never just one. There are at least 2, 3 or more, and it seems that at least one of them is tainted with whatever is controlling the dwarves. It would also explain why that old dwarf was under control as well. The prisoner's water supply. Ash had no doubt this was where the parasites were coming from, clinging inside the bodies of the dwarves. But still, it doesn't make sense. I haven't drunk any water from this city. So why was I feeling the unease from the start? Was it not because the demon was trying to control me? Or was it simply my senses warning me of the danger? Ash no longer knew what to believe and what to discard. Being a paranoid overthinker often led to tangled thoughts and contradictions, and this was one of those moments where every path of reasoning seemed to split in two. Choosing which one to trust felt impossible. Before his thoughts could spiral further into that maze, the sound of footsteps returned, heavier and more numerous than before. This time it was not just one person approaching, but several. Ash was somewhat relieved that the prison cells were designed like solid doors with only a small barred opening to see through, of course at the height of dwarfs, which meant that the view inside was limited. Even so, to be safe and avoid the risk of anyone noticing the metallic scent of blood in the air, he swiftly gathered all traces, the blood splatters and even the corpse, into a spare space ring and stored it in his soul space. Once the evidence was gone, he calmly made his way back to his own cell as if nothing had happened. Snow had already retreated into his soul space, hidden from view. Within minutes, the footsteps halted right in front of his cell. Seeing the familiar face, Ash felt little better. "Long time no see, dwarf captain," Ash said in a steady voice. "Can you help me get out of here? You know, right? I was only here to deliver the item, not to kill anyone. I'm certain someone is framing me." The dwarf captain gave a firm nod. "I know you weren't here to kill anyone. That's why I hurried over as soon as I heard the accusation. But I cannot simply take you out of the prison, Ash. You might not know, or perhaps you do, but we dwarves do not take the death of even one of our own lightly. The same way we do not forget such losses, we also do not forget favors." He paused briefly before continuing, his tone firm but without hostility. "What I can do is get you out of the continent. I've already seen the camera footage. It was clear that you were trying to help the old man, but then he suddenly died. However, I cannot take you to the central city with me. You will have to give the item to me instead, and that is the only way I can guarantee your safety." As soon as his words were finished, the cell door clicked open. The dwarf captain stepped back, his movements calm, while the soldiers who had accompanied him stayed alert, but still stepped back, as if asking Ash to come outside. From what Ash could sense, the captain's strength was at the Grandmaster level, while the others were either masters or experts. Ash knew that in a direct confrontation, he stood no chance against a Grandmaster, at least not yet. Still, he was not naive enough to think that the dwarf captain was acting purely out of kindness. There was always the possibility that these pleasant words were meant to lower his guard, to coax him into handing over the item. After that, his fate could easily take a turn he could not predict. "I won't fall for it, but maybe I can use this to get information." That thought settled firmly in his mind. If there was an opportunity hidden in this situation, he would have to twist it to his advantage. "Can you remove these cuffs?" Ash asked as he stepped forward, out of the shadows of the cell. "Sure." The dwarf captain gave a small smile and easily unlocked the cuffs with a flick of his key. The ease with which he agreed made Ash wonder for a brief moment. Was he actually being sincere about what he told me? Even so, Ash kept his thoughts to himself and remained silent. "Do you have any idea who the killer might be?" the dwarf captain asked, his expression turning serious, his eyes scanning Ash's face as though searching for a hint of deceit. I have my suspicions," Ash replied, rubbing his wrists where the metal had pressed into his skin. "I believe it's some sort of demon, though for now it's still only a suspicion." "I see." The captain's response was brief, unreadable. "All right, give me the item and I will allow you to leave immediately," the dwarf captain said, his voice carrying an edge of authority that left little room for argument. Ash shook his head. "I can't. You might kill me after getting the item, and I'd rather not die. This young, at least. First let me leave, then I'll give you the item." The words had barely left his mouth before the atmosphere shifted. The soldiers surrounding them tightened their grips, weapons rising in unison to aim directly at him. A heavy, unusual tension settled in the air, pressing down on the space between them. "I knew it. Damn bastards. Crap, I knew it." Looking at the soldiers still aiming their weapons at him, Ash was at least half sure that whatever the dwarf captain's name was, the man was just coating his words in honey to lure him into handing over the item. But then the captain slowly raised his hand, and the soldiers lowered their weapons in unison. Their eyes, however, never left Ash for even a heartbeat, sharp and watchful like hounds trained to strike at the smallest sign of movement. "Aye, lad, I can see why you would think that way," the captain said at last, his voice steady and deep, the kind that seemed to roll out from the chest rather than the throat. "I understand. I understand it all too well." He let the moment stretch, his gaze fixed on Ash as if he were weighing every flicker of expression. "But that item ye carry, it is worth more than gold or steel. If ye hand it over, I swear on my hammer that I will see ye leave this continent unharmed. I will even put me best men on clearing your name. A dwarf does not break such a promise. After all, a dwarf's oath is heavier than the mountains." The captain took a slow, deliberate step forward. "But if ye are thinkin' of runnin', I would say think twice. Even with your space magic, the land itself will not let ye slip away so easily. Every stone here has eyes, lad. And for helping ye, I will be needin' your cooperation. And that cannot happen unless—" The words hung in the air, like a hammer raised high but not yet fallen. Ash finished them quietly, his voice steady. "Unless I give you that item." The prison hall seemed to grow colder, the silence heavy and unmoving, as if even the stones were holding their breath. They were giving Ash time to think, but he was already certain. If the item was in a space ring, he would already be lying lifeless on the ground. Or, at best, they would be stripping the ring from his finger right now rather than speaking to him. It was only because they assumed he was a space mage capable of crafting his own personal subspace that they were forced to bargain instead of kill. And the amusing part was, Ash had never claimed such a thing. They had arrived at that conclusion on their own. Killing him would be risky because once a space mage died, their subspace collapsed and everything inside was lost to the void forever. That danger alone kept their weapons at bay. He had a fair idea how they had made the connection. Before entering, they had ordered him to stand upon an intricate array, one he recognized from his own knowledge. It was a detection array specialized to peer into the contents of storage devices, even space rings. When the array revealed that he carried none, the only conclusion left to them was that his possessions were hidden in a personal subspace. And such a thing could only belong to a space mage. Ash was not going to correct them. Misunderstanding is good. It makes the guard lower. "All right then," Ash said at last, his tone calm. "I trust the words of a dwarf who swears on his hammer, at least." With that, he summoned the item the principal had entrusted to him. Even now, as it appeared in his hand, he remembered the surprise and confusion he had felt the moment he first received it. Because the item was here. Moonstone and Stellar Stone. 2 boxes appeared in his hands, their surfaces cool and smooth to the touch, each carrying a faint trace of ancient energy that almost seemed to hum under his skin. They were quickly taken by the dwarf captain, who handled them with a swiftness that spoke of both eagerness and care. He opened each box without delay, and inside, nestled in soft padding, were two small stones, neither larger than a baby's fist. Their faint glow reflected in the captain's eyes, and a satisfied smile crept onto his face as if confirming something only he knew. In truth, Ash was reluctant to part with these stones, not because of their rarity alone, but because of what he had learned from the Whisperer, that moon and star blessings appearing together within the same era was never a good sign. The Whisperer had clearly wanted to explain more, but the invisible chains of causality held him back, preventing him from saying too much. Even so, knowing the dwarves were specifically requesting these stones was enough to make Ash wary. He had already taken precautions before this meeting, marking both boxes as anchors. He had originally planned to make the stones themselves the anchors, but elemental property stones resisted such interference, and his attempts had failed. So Ash understood what he needed to do. If he wanted to know what was truly happening in this continent, if he wanted to uncover the demon's power and its reach, he had to give up the item. It was the simplest way to get closer to the truth, and so he handed it over. "Thank you, you have worked splendidly. Truly, I have no words, but that is as far as your help can go." Frowning, while also noticing the change in the way the dwarf spoke, Ash asked, "What does that mean?" "Simple, really. Your work is done. You just need to die now." The last word had barely left the captain's mouth before the soldiers behind him raised their weapons in perfect unison. Mana-powered guns hummed with stored energy, their barrels glowing faintly. Others began weaving magic. Fire sparked to life, lightning crackled in the air, and wind twisted into sharp currents. All of it aimed directly at Ash's head. Ash's eyes widened, a flash of disbelief mixing with the sharp sting of betrayal. "You!" He never finished. The first volley struck with brutal force, his skull bursting apart under the barrage. Holes tore through his body as magic blasts seared flesh and shattered bone. His breath faltered and stopped. Ash was dead. At least that was what they believed. The dwarf captain let out a long breath, his smile widening as he looked down at Ash's lifeless body. But there was something disturbingly wrong about the scene. His eyes, and the eyes of every soldier behind him, were completely vacant. Their pupils were dull, glassy, devoid of any natural focus. And yet, they all wore the same eerie smile, one that radiated a strange, hollow satisfaction. Without a single word exchanged, they moved in seamless, unnatural coordination. One soldier stepped forward, uncorked a container of highly flammable oil, and poured it over Ash's body. The heavy, pungent smell filled the air. The flames caught instantly, spreading in waves over his form. Flesh blackened and curled, cloth crumbled into ash, yet no one looked away. They all stood there, silent, their blank eyes reflecting the firelight, watching until nothing remained but scattered ashes. Once it was done, they turned together, moving with the same unnatural coordination they had shown before, leaving the area as quietly as they had arrived. After they left, a minute passed, then another, and another. Exactly 4 minutes later, inside the prison cell where Ash had been kept, a small droplet of blood appeared out of nowhere. More droplets followed, appearing and merging toward each other. They began to swell in size, shaping into the form of a human. Within seconds, a new Ash stood there, completely naked, his expression dark and unamused. "Bloody hell! Those bastards burned me! Those sons of bitches!" Ash was furious, far more than usual. His plan had indeed been to die, at least temporarily. He had intended to let Ash burn, the identity he was using, be erased from the demon's memory. After that, he would return under the guise of the unknown, which would give him freedom to act without any restrictions. There had been another reason for such a reckless plan. People often revealed secrets after killing someone, whether out of pride, arrogance, or carelessness. Ash had seen it happen before, and he had hoped to overhear something that could give him an unexpected lead or important revelation. But they were already under the demon's control. And from the looks of it, the demon cannot speak through those it controls. Then how were they able to talk with me normally earlier? Questions piled up in his head faster than he could answer them. He did not expect to be left with so many uncertainties, and he certainly did not expect what came next. For that bastard to burn my body, I swear I will burn that abomination to ashes myself. Truthfully, Ash was lucky he had already been dead when they set his body on fire. If he had been alive while burning, he could not say whether he would have stayed still and let them burn him. After dying, he had managed, through his willpower, to delay his resurrection. It had cost him nearly all his mental strength, but it allowed him to avoid detection and deceive the demon for at least a short time. It had been a strange experience to say the least, watching the world without eyes, seeing his own body burn without feeling the pain, surrounded by that cold clarity and bone-deep stillness. It was his first time experiencing death in such a way. But at least one of his long-standing questions was answered. Ash had always wondered what would happen if his entire body was destroyed. How would he revive? The answer, it seemed, was simple: through blood. Specifically, blood stored in his soul space. And what would happen if even his blood was gone? Ash had no intention of finding out. Yeah, let's not test my luck. I am already far too good at attracting trouble. With that final thought, he quickly dressed himself and prepared to leave. I know nothing. Yeah, Ash knew nothing about the enemy, even after giving what could only be called a spectacular performance of dying. All he had now were a few speculations from his observations, and even those felt uncertain. Whether any of them were true or nothing more than wrong guesses, he could not say. Clad in the guise of the unknown, wrapped in his phantom armor, the hood pulling shadows over most of his face, and the mask hiding what little remained, Ash stood at the very top of the underground city's dome. Or rather, clinging to it like a spider clings to the ceiling, holding on with a single hand. The absolute concealment shrouded him completely, not a trace of his presence leaking out. From this vantage point, he could see the city in its entirety. Lights glimmered from windows and lanterns, streets branched like veins, and the dwarves moved about their lives far below. The sight should have impressed him at least, but all he felt was an urge to turn his back and leave. He wanted nothing more than to be gone from this place. Yes, if he could, he would have already left for the central city by now. If not for one thing, I will burn him, that bastard. That thought alone was enough to anchor him here. The thought burned hotter than the flames that had consumed his body. Call it petty or childish, Ash did not care. He was a man who remembered every slight, every wound, and every humiliation, no matter how much time passed. If someone wronged him, he kept that memory until the debt was paid. He would have made Melissia suffer through the exact same way she had once made him endure, if not for the state he had found her in at the time, and consider his revenge taken. He remembered every single debt. He had sworn to wipe out the Shadow Rats when he took the Rune of Stability, to destroy the one who had created the trial ground on the Dragon Continent, and even Solaretha's name was etched deep into his memory. He had not acted on any of these grudges yet, but the day would come. The unicorn might be spared death, but that did not mean they were safe from his revenge. Killing was not the only way to settle a score. But this time, I will burn that demon for sure. And for that to happen, he first needed to find the source from where the demon was polluting the water to control the people. With Snow's X-ray vision, the network of water supply points across the underground city was easy to locate. Ash began at one end and moved through them one by one, checking for any sign of corruption. Hours passed like that, but at each location, there was nothing. No strange mana, no demonic presence, no concealed remains. Finally, he reached the last water supply point, far from the city's main entrance. He scanned it thoroughly, his gaze lingering on every pipe and reservoir. Still, there was nothing. There is nothing here. Was my assumption wrong? He weighed the possibility. If it is not from the water, then could it be from the food? But unlike water, food has no single source. It comes from countless houses, shops, and storerooms. Searching through them all would take too much time, I wish I had some sort of intelligence gathering Wait, if I do not have one, then I can just create it, right? He still had one skill slot left. If he could somehow create an information gathering skill, even if the chance of success was small, it could give him exactly what he needed. Moving without hesitation, he slipped behind the massive water tank. There was a small cabin nearby, most likely a resting place or storage space for maintenance workers who serviced the water system. Ash entered, closing the door softly behind him. The cabin was dim, dusty, and silent, the air stale from disuse. Certain that no one was around, he exhaled slowly, cleared his mind, and stepped into his soul space. Entering together with Snow, Ash spoke clearly, "Skill creation." As the familiar black and white window materialized before him, Ash began throwing out one idea after another for an information-gathering skill. Most were immediately rejected, either due to an insufficient description or because the probability of creation was abyssal. Create a skill for information gathering using all my runes. Insufficient description. Create a skill using rune of. Insufficient description. Create. Skill creation failed due to very low probability. Create. Failed. Create. Failed. Create. Failed. No matter what Ash tried, the result was the same. Every attempt failed, the creation chance locked at an absurdly low 0.1%. That was far too low to create any skill worth having. Looking at his arsenal of runes, the outcome was no surprise. He did not possess a single rune directly related to information gathering. Rune of Knowledge might help, perhaps, but Ash was far from certain. What he needed was a carrier, something that could move freely, exist everywhere without being noticed, and yet still be sentient enough to listen, collect information, and deliver it to him. Was there even such a thing? He could not think of even a single one. He didn't think something like that even existed. Or did there? Ash did not know, nor did he have the time to think about it further because without warning, he was suddenly thrown out of his soul space. Boom! Crap! His senses snapped back to reality, and he found himself surrounded by flames. The heat licked at the air, and the roar of the blaze was deafening. This time, it was not only his own body burning. Everything around him was on fire. The water tank above had been blasted apart, twisted metal and shattered stone littering the ground. The shockwave had leveled everything nearby. His body was already healing, and the torn fabric of his clothing began stitching itself back together. Before his thoughts could even settle, boom! Another deafening explosion erupted nearby, the force slamming into him like a battering ram and sending him flying across the wreckage. Damn dwarfs! He could already guess what had happened. Someone must have noticed an intruder near the water supply, and decided the quickest solution was to destroy the entire area. That was the dwarven way. Shoot first, ask questions later. Ash knew exactly why he had been caught in the blast. When he entered his soul space, only his consciousness retreated. His physical body remained in the real world. From the dwarf's perspective, he had simply been standing there in silence, doing who knows what, making him a prime target. And yet, I had absolute concealment activated. For hell's sake, how did they even see me? Not willing to test his luck any further, and now aware of the direction from which the dwarves were watching, Ash teleported away without hesitation. The world shifted, and in the next instant he was standing deep within a dark alley in the middle of the city. He leaned against the wall, taking deep, steadying breaths as his clothes finished repairing themselves. What a crazy city, really. And this sentence Ash didn't knew that he would be repeating for a long, long time, because not even a single minute had passed before. Boom! Another explosion tore through the air, the deafening blast shaking him to his core. Curses! There are people around here. There are houses. How can they? Boom! Boom! His thoughts were drowned in nothing but the relentless roar of destruction. The entire area was engulfed in chaos, the missiles launched by the dwarves carrying nothing but pure annihilation. Within moments, every house in a radius of several kilometers had been reduced to dust and shattered stone. The same fate had befallen the people. Blood painted the ground in dark splashes, bodies of the old and young alike lying scattered and broken. Children, elders, no one had been spared. Ash's eyes trembled as he took it all in. Have they gone mad? Or is this the demons' doing? He was not sure what to believe. If the dwarves had truly gone insane, attacking their own without hesitation, that would be madness beyond reason. But his instincts told him this was not the case. If they were not acting of their own will, then these attacks had to be connected to the demon in some way. Beneath a massive slab of rubble, Ash stayed perfectly still. He could have teleported away in an instant, but he chose not to. If he left cover now, there was no telling whether another barrage would come hurtling towards him. But there was various question burning in his mind, and one such was, how is he sensing me? Or rather, seeing me? It was the most troubling thing of all. His concealment was absolute, just as the name of the skill stated, absolute concealment. Never before had it failed him. This was the first time another being had been able to pinpoint his location while it was active. As his body finished mending and his clothes stitched themselves back together, Ash slowly crawled out from beneath the rubble. He ignored the lifeless bodies of dwarves strewn around him, stepping over broken limbs and crushed armor until he emerged into the open. And then he saw it. Ah, damn, it's a nightmare. And in that instant, he wished he had never laid eyes on it. Ah, damn, it's a nightmare. And in that instant, he wished he had never laid eyes on it. The scene before him was the kind that sank deep into the soul, an imprint that no time or distance could erase. The streets that had once been filled with dwarves busy in their daily lives were now nothing more than a charred graveyard. Stone buildings lay collapsed in heaps of blackened rubble, their jagged edges still glowing faintly from the lingering heat of the blasts. Fires crackled and burned without restraint, their orange light casting long, warped shadows that danced across the devastation. Bodies lay strewn through the wreckage. Some were crushed beneath the weight of fallen walls, others torn apart by the sheer force of the explosions. The sharp stench of blood mixed with thick, acrid smoke, filling the air so heavily that it felt like it clung to his lungs with every breath. And among them were children, small hands frozen mid-reach, faces locked in smiles and laughter that would never return. It was a massacre, one done with purpose, deliberate, merciless. Ash felt a weight tighten inside his chest, a mix of cold, controlled rage and the bitter metallic taste of helplessness. He forced himself to turn away from the lifeless faces, shifting his gaze toward a faint flicker of movement in the distance. What he saw behind the destruction made his stomach churn. From as far as his eyes could see, the entire edge of the explosion site was lined with dwarves. They stood still, watching him, the burning houses and scattered corpses with hollow, lifeless eyes. And it was not a few dozen of them. It was far, far more. With no visible end, dwarves stretched across every direction. Ash teleported to the high vantage point of a broken building. The stone beneath his feet cracked and scorched, and the sight before him made his blood cold. Hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, perhaps even millions. He could not tell the exact number, but one thing was certain. He was standing at the center of a crater, surrounded by a living sea of dwarves. Every one of them carried a weapon, from crude tools to sharpened blades. Children, the elderly, the young children's were gripping small knives. All of them stared directly at him with that same twisted, unnatural smile. A thought rose unbidden, one he had considered only a few hours ago, echoing alongside the final words of the dead criminals. If everyone was under a mind hex, the demon should have made everyone attack me. Another thought surfaced. He is everywhere. Then another. We are all going to die. Another. Run. Run away. And again. He is everywhere. He is everywhere. He is everywhere. Ash finally understood what they had meant. Whoever or whatever he truly was everywhere. And the city was already beyond saving. He had been moving exactly as the demon wanted, dancing in its palm from the start. Looking at the scene before him, Ash let out a quiet, humorless chuckle. For the first time since arriving in this world, he did not know what to do next. The sound that escaped his lips was not amusement, but the strained laugh of someone backed into a corner, a laugh that tasted of iron and helplessness. What should I do? Should I? No, cannot run. How could I? After seeing something like this, if I turn my back and pretend it is not my problem, then no matter how much time passes, I will never be able to meet my own eyes in the mirror again. Cannot run. But then, what can I do? Ash knew the answer, yet it was the very thing weighing him down. He had to kill the demon. That was the only true solution. But could he even manage that? What if the demon's strength surpassed his own by far? It already had so many dwarfs under its control, and there was no telling how many more were hidden elsewhere. Should he try to fight every last dwarf here? He could. But in the end, he would lose. He would survive because he could not truly die, yet that survival would mean nothing. The outcome would be defeat. While he was lost in thought, every single dwarf in sight suddenly took a step forward in perfect unison, moving as though tied together by invisible strings. Ash did not stop to think. He vanished from the spot in an instant, teleporting away. He reappeared at the far edge of the land of Forge, standing once again at the place where his journey into this territory had begun. From here, endless mountain ranges stretched toward the horizon, jagged peaks clawing at the sky. He stared at them in silence. He had run away, yet in his mind it was not running. This was a calculated retreat. Ash understood that his life magic could heal the dwarfs, but during the process, far too many would die. Rather than struggling to heal millions one by one, it would be far better to destroy the source, the demon, and free everyone in a single decisive act. But finding the demon was another matter entirely. He had no skill, no tool, no special ability to locate its position, and even less understanding of what the demon's true power might be. For the first time in a long while, Ash felt the weight of helplessness. He needed help. Several names came to mind: the World Tree, the Whisperer, the Saints. If he told them about the situation, he was certain they would help. Yet, hesitation lingered. It was not that he doubted them too deeply, although a small shadow of mistrust always existed. What truly concerned him was how the demon would respond to their arrival. If it could so easily control and slaughter the dwarfs, what might it do against the saints? And then the thought came, cold and unshakable: what if even the dwarven saints are already under its control? The idea alone was enough to make his skin crawl, yet it was not without reason. What he had just witnessed would be enough to make anyone question even the most trusted of figures. In Ironhall City, most warriors and guards were below Grandmaster rank. Awakened individuals were extremely rare. Their numbers were nowhere near enough to fill armies. Ash did not know the exact count, but in an average city, there would usually be at least 10 Grandmasters and perhaps a single legendary rank, the city head, overseeing them. The number of fighters below Grandmaster fluctuated greatly. But here was the reality. Ash could not yet defeat a single Grandmaster. At best, he could match them blow for a short while, but victory was far from his reach. And this city had at least 10 of them, each with decades of experience and the power to crush him if they fought seriously. That was why he needed help. Should I bring Ray? The idea passed through his mind, lingering only for a moment before he dismissed it. He knew Ray well enough to understand that his presence was unpredictable. Who could say if it would turn the tide in his favor, or ignite a disaster far greater than the one already at hand? Nah, better to leave him be. That guy is far more likely to invite trouble than to solve it. Letting out a slow breath, Ash reached into his soul space and drew out a small communicator. It looked almost like a crude walkie-talkie, its surface dark and faintly scratched, but the runic lines etched into it pulsed faintly with power. This was no ordinary trinket. Though its design was rough and the runic enchantments clearly the work of human craftsmanship, crude compared to real runic sorcery, it served its purpose well enough. Its range could stretch across continents, perhaps even touch the farthest corners of the world, or so the Whisperer had claimed. The Whisperer had given it to Ash together with the mana imitation device. the very same one that had shattered during his duel with Ray, along with a simple instruction. If you ever find yourself truly cornered, use this. And now it seemed that moment had come. With a quiet click, Ash activated the device and spoke into it. Hello. For a few seconds, there was only static, faint and distant. Then a familiar voice filled the silence. Deep, aged, and steady. The whisper's tone carried both authority and a strange, underlying warmth. Is something wrong? Do you need help? Are you safe? The concern in that voice made Ash shift uncomfortably. It was unusual, hearing someone care for him. Clearing his throat, Ash replied, yes. No, nothing is wrong. I'm well. I'm fine. It's just, I need a little help. And then he began to speak, telling him everything. From the moment he stepped foot into the land of Forge, to every encounter and attack, to the strange things he had uncovered and the guesses that had taken root in his mind. He recounted it all without holding back, the words flowing steadily as if releasing them lightened the weight on his chest. When Ash finished, there was silence on the other end. Not the silence of a broken connection, but one filled with thought. Finally, the whisperer spoke again. Can you meet me in person? There was something in his voice that Ash could not quite place. Shock, perhaps, or maybe caution. Whatever it was, it made Ash wonder what the man wanted to discuss face-to-face rather than over the communicator. Still, he agreed without hesitation. And as soon as his mana had fully recovered, he teleported back to the academy. You are here, an old man muttered, sitting on the bench of a beautiful gazebo made entirely of polished white marble. It stood gracefully in the middle of an open garden, surrounded by lush grass, tall trees swaying gently in the breeze, and flowers in full bloom that painted the scene with vibrant colors. Above, light gray clouds drifted slowly across the sky, filtering the sunlight so that only a soft, diffused glow fell over the place, making the already serene atmosphere even more beautiful and calming to the senses. On the marble table between them, there was a teacup placed in front of the old man, faint steam curling from its surface. Across from it sat another cup, untouched for now, patiently waiting for the person it was meant for. I gotta say, old man, the place you chose to meet is quite beautiful, Ash muttered as he appeared without warning, stepping out of space itself and into the peaceful setting of the marble gazebo. On the surface, he appeared calm, but inside his chest there was a faint, restless itch he could not quite describe. After seeing the creepy scene in the dwarf continent, that itch never went away. Sighing, he sat across from the old man and, without wasting any time, asked directly, So, why did you call me here? Do you want to see the dead body of the one who died because of that demon? The old man, whose once dark hair was streaked with white from the slow march of age, had a face marked by fine lines and wrinkles, yet his presence was far from frail. His eyes, strange and unique, were constantly shifting and rotating like intricate wheels of destiny. But at this moment there was a sharper, almost piercing intensity within them as he replied, Yes, you are half right and half wrong. I called you here because I did indeed want to check something from the dead bodies, but that is not the only reason. There is something else as well. But first, show the bodies to me. I want to confirm something. Ash, hearing his words, simply reached into his soul space and took out the space ring he had used to store the corpses of the criminals. Without hesitation, he slid it across the table. The whisperer picked it up and closed his fingers around it. Ash could not tell exactly what the old man did, but the moment the ring touched his hand, a soft golden hue began to radiate from it. The wheels in his eyes, already in constant motion, started spinning faster and faster as though they were being driven by some unseen force. Several minutes passed in silence before the spinning finally slowed. The light from the ring faded, and the old man let out a quiet, almost weary sigh before placing it back on the table between them. So, what did you find out? Ash asked, leaning forward slightly. Indeed, my fear came true, the old man replied, his voice carrying the weight of certainty. I know what kind of creature it is. Firstly, it is not exactly a demon. I encountered one a very, very long time ago. The creature was called the Hollow Mother. His tone was grave, and his expression carried a heaviness that spoke of old scars and memories best left buried. It is not the strongest creature in terms of raw power, he continued, his gaze distant as though recalling a time long past. But it is one of the deadliest that exists. Ash could see the grimness in his face, as if the man was sharing an experience that still lingered in his bones. I was very young back then, the old man said quietly, and I was also not bound by any sort of restrictions. At that time, this creature almost destroyed the entirety of human civilization. It reproduces very thin worms, each no larger than a single mana particle. He paused, his fingers lightly brushing the rim of his teacup. Though these worms do not live for long, surviving for roughly a single day before dying, the reproduction rate of the Hollow Mother is unimaginably fast, almost infinite. The dead ones are replaced within seconds by new ones. These worms are called Hollowborns. Ash listened without blinking, his mind trying to picture something so small yet so dangerous. It needs almost nothing to spread, the old man went on. Just mana in the air, and within moments it can scatter millions, even trillions of these small worms, completely invisible and undetectable to the naked eye. Hearing this explanation, Ash's mouth fell open slightly. Wait. Are you telling me that the entire underground area of the dwarves was filled with these worms you're talking about? The old man exhaled deeply and gave a slow nod. Yes. Does that mean? The reason my instincts were warning me was because those tiny bugs were entering my body and being destroyed by the life mana inside me? Ash knew his body was anything but normal. Every time he was injured, the life mana within him would heal his wounds. His entire body was saturated with it, so the Hollowborns would have been destroyed before they could do anything, all without even triggering his rune. That explained why he never felt anything directly. Only a quiet, insistent warning from his instincts that something in the air was wrong. These Hollowborns can hide themselves by copying the life force of their host, making it impossible to detect them. They do the same in the air by imitating the mana signature of the surrounding mana particles. Only those who can perceive the true flow of mana can actually see these worms spawned from the Hollow Mother. Ash's eyes narrowed slightly as the old man's tone darkened. Once inside a host, these Hollowborns act as a conduit, the Whisperer continued. Through them, the Hollow Mother can seize complete control of the mind and body of any infected person. There is no limit to how many it can control, just as there is no limit to how many worms it can create. And it is not necessary that it will control anyone immediately. It may choose to control or it may choose not to. The Hollowborns can simply remain hidden, letting the host live their normal life, blending in perfectly with the world around them. And when the Hollow Mother needs something, it can take control at any moment, turning that person into its puppet without the slightest warning. This way, no third party ever suspects the person who is already under control. I see, so that was why everyone was behaving normally. The Hollow Mother wanted me to get under its control without knowing anything. But, can it control anyone? As the question burned in his mind, Ash raised a hand slightly, interrupting him despite knowing it was rude. His voice was steady, but the question was urgent. Is it possible that it could control even a saint? The Whisperer fell silent for a long moment before finally letting out a slow, rueful sigh and nodding. Ash's expression darkened. The Hollow Mother can indeed control saints, the old man said gravely. I have seen it happen with my own eyes long ago. The higher the rank, the harder it is for them to fall under its control. But if they are exposed to enough Hollowborns, even they run the risk of having their minds seized. Ash frowned, still trying to piece it together. But, didn't you just say that those who can see the true flow of mana can see these Hollowborns? Then why would higher-ranked people who should be able to see such things still get infected? I don't understand. It is true, the Whisperer admitted, his gaze steady. The higher you climb in rank, the more you perceive the truth of the world and the flow of mana within it. But seeing them is one thing, avoiding them is another. The Whisperer continued slowly, his eyes narrowing slightly as if remembering a grim past. The Hollow Mother is a cunning creature. It sees everything the Hollowborns see. It is not a single mind but a collective consciousness, something almost impossible to fully comprehend through normal means. It observes, it learns, and it adapts. Even if someone can see the worms, can they avoid them forever? The answer is no. Hollowborns do not truly die. For every one you destroy, countless more take its place within moments. They can also sense when they are being watched. The moment they realize someone can see them, they change their behavior and focus all efforts on that person. In such a situation, if millions or even trillions of Hollowborns decide to target a saint, that saint might survive for a while, but for how long? Eventually, they will be forced to flee or hunt down and destroy the Hollow Mother itself. A saint could use their domain to force the Hollowborns out and protect themselves, but a domain consumes an enormous amount of energy. The longer it is maintained, the faster their reserves drain, and once their strength runs low, the chances of infection rise sharply. He paused, then spoke more heavily. You might say that once a saint has detected the Hollowborns, they should simply retreat. But think from the perspective of a saint, especially if they are a dwarf. Dwarves are known to value their kin above all else. How can one simply turn away and run, leaving their people to become puppets of such a vile abomination? They cannot, and because of that, they stay, and sooner or later they are infected. The old man leaned back with a tired sigh. It is not truly their fault. The Hollow Mother should not even exist anymore. It should. No, I know it died. I saw it with my own eyes back then, and it has been a very, very long time since that day. I doubt any record of its existence still remains. Which is why I have a strong suspicion that, due to the complete lack of knowledge about what they were dealing with, and because of the dwarves' deep loyalty to one another, even if they sensed the danger of the Hollowborns, no one ran. And now, every single one of them is under the control of the Hollow Mother. Silence. There was nothing but silence. Around them, the wind blew softly, making Ash's hair sway slightly, but his mind felt as though it had been struck by something heavy. Everyone is under control, although it would be a lie to say that Ash cared deeply about the dwarves. But even indifference has its limits. If someone told you that every single person on a continent, perhaps hundreds of millions, was under the control of one creature, it would be enough to make anyone's heart tighten with dread. Taking a deep breath, Ash's eyes, now shining with determination, locked onto the old man. His voice was steady, but the weight in it was unmistakable. So, how did you kill it? How did you kill it? Hearing Ash's question, the old man slowly rose from his seat and walked toward the white marble railing of the gazebo. His fingertips brushed against its polished surface, tracing the delicate curves as if grounding himself in the present before answering. His voice came out low, carrying the weight of an old memory. I do not know. Ash tilted his head slightly, certain that his ears had deceived him. I missed what you just said. Can you repeat it? The old man let out a slow, rueful sigh, his gaze drifting toward the gray clouds above. I do not know how to kill it. It was not me who destroyed that horrifying abomination. Someone else did. Someone far stronger than I was back then. I do not know the exact nature of the power he used, but the creature died. Instantly. He paused for a moment, his voice growing heavier as he spoke again. He killed that thing using some form of dark mana. Even now, I can still recall the feeling of that energy. It was chilling to say the least, something that felt entirely opposed to life. Being near it was like standing in the shadow of death itself. Speaking of life, he continued, life mana was also effective against the Hollow Mother. At that time, the Elven King came close to killing it. I am certain he could have succeeded, but the creature managed to escape, and the Elven King chose not to pursue it. Wait, why are you changing the topic? Ash leaned forward, his tone pressing. Who was the one who killed the Hollow Mother? I mean, what was his power level? What was his name? It's Death Affinity. It has to be Death Affinity. But how can that be possible? Having death affinity would mean that person somehow came into contact with the rune of death. One way or another, but the rune of death is a hidden rune. Or is it not? If it truly is hidden, then how could another person have accessed it, when not even the ancient civilization was able to discover it? No. The rune of death cannot come into contact with another person so easily. There were countless restrictions just to absorb it. I do not think it is something like that. Does this mean there was someone naturally born with death affinity in ancient times? It was entirely possible. If fate affinity could exist, a rarity so extreme that it appeared only once in billions, if not trillions, then the existence of a natural death affinity or even a pure life affinity was not beyond reason. I don't know who that person was. He wore a white mask at the time, so I could not see his face, and shortly after killing that abomination, he vanished without leaving even a trace behind. He even took the corpse with him, so, regretfully, we were never able to study the Hollow Mother in detail. That person's nickname was... The old man hesitated for a heartbeat, as though speaking the name carried its own weight. Grim Reaper. After all, he came, took life and went away just like a real Grim Reaper. That was what the people called him, at least. Ash fell silent after hearing that. His mind filled with countless thoughts running endlessly in circles. At last, he exhaled slowly, letting out a quiet sigh. Does that mean I will have to ask the Elf Queen for help in killing that creature? Ash asked, his tone calm but carrying a hint of reluctance. Yes, the old man replied without any delay. After all, she is the only one capable of using life mana. I can also use it. Let's not tell him that right now. As Ash was mulling over his own thoughts, the old man began muttering under his breath, but his voice was still loud enough for Ash to hear every word. I cannot be certain whether that creature is directly tied to the demons or not, but after discovering that all the blacksmiths have gathered in the central city to forge something, I cannot shake the feeling that the Hollow Mother is somehow connected to the demon's inner ranks. Otherwise, it would make no sense for it to act in such a systematic, coordinated way. He paused for a moment, his brows furrowed, as if turning the problem over in his mind again and again. But what is their purpose? What exactly are they creating that would require them to go as far as controlling an entire race? I cannot understand it, not even a little. Ash heard him clearly, but chose not to respond. Even he could not say for certain what the demons truly wanted. He knew the Demon King's ultimate aim was to gather more runes, yet the way things were unfolding hinted at something else, something different. What Ash did not yet know was that it was not the Demon King behind this particular scheme, but the Demon Prince. Old man, can you go over the abilities of the Hollow Mother and the Hollowborns again? Ash asked, his voice steady but focused. After that, they spoke for a long time, revisiting every piece of knowledge the old man could remember. Its methods of reproduction, the speed of its spread, the ways it could hide, its strong points, its weaknesses, and every dangerous trait it possessed. The conversation flowed without pause, both of them weighing each possibility carefully. By the time they were done, nearly an hour and a half had passed. But remember this, Ash, the old man said gravely. Even back then, the Hollow Mother died without being able to put up much of a fight against that great man. This means there may still be abilities it possesses that I do not know of, abilities it never had the chance to reveal. He's right. I should not be overly dependent on this information. There is a high chance that it could be incomplete or even wrong. I will remember it, Ash replied quietly. With that, he rose from his seat, ready to leave. And I would like to tell you something else as well. It was another reason I called you here. The old man's voice was calm, but there was a weight to it, as though every word had been chosen with care. You know the Demon King is trying to invade this world, right? But because of the vast spatial distance and the differences between realms, crossing from one world to another is far from easy. The very fabric of space resists such travel. His tone grew heavier, his gaze fixed on a far-off point as if recalling ancient knowledge that most could never imagine. However, recently the number of dungeons belonging to the demons has risen sharply. And it is not only them. Even the rate at which ordinary dungeons appear has increased alarmingly. The change is too sudden to be natural. As their numbers swell, the higher-ranking gates are being handled directly by the saints, who must also remain on constant guard against dungeon breaks. He took in a slow breath, letting it out in a weary exhale. So, it will not be possible to send you any help in such a situation. After all, before the old man could finish, Ash gave a faint smile, his eyes holding a flicker of understanding. I understand. Even if they came, there is a high chance they would be infected. Do not worry. I will ask the Elf Queen for help instead. Inside, however, Ash's thoughts were anything but calm. The number of dungeons is increasing, and it is happening fast. Much too fast. The timing is drawing closer. Could it be that my interference is causing the events of this world to accelerate? Possibly. The changes are undeniable. Still, even if that is the case, I still have some time left, but not enough to relax. I need to move faster. I must grow stronger as well. After I return from the Dwarven continent, I will train without pause, mostly focusing on my sword. Being a magic swordsman, it is almost shameful that I cannot even wield a sword like a true master, nor have I managed to awaken my aura. I will be going then, Ash said, bowing lightly, though there was a quiet resolve in his movements. Yes, off you go. And take care of your health, the old man replied. His voice softened slightly at the end, almost betraying a touch of concern. The next instant, Ash vanished, his presence slipping away like a ripple fading across still water. The old man remained like that for a long moment, staring at the spot where Ash had stood. The surrounding breeze stirred the grass, carrying with it the faint fragrance of flowers, but none of it reached him. A sigh escaped his lips, deep and tired, the kind that spoke of years weighed down by duty. What days I am living to see! It should be me standing on the battlefield, fighting the monsters, protecting everyone. Yet here I am, forced to watch helplessly while the younger generation shoulders the burden meant for my hands. His gaze lowered to the polished surface of the table, and his voice dropped to a whisper meant for no one but himself. I truly am beginning to hate fate, and its cruel causality. Knowledge really is a curse. Damn it, I wish I had never learned any heavenly or cosmic secrets. If I had not, perhaps I could have been free to act however I wished. After winning the duel with Ray, Ash came into the spotlight of the academy. Everyone had started to at least feel a sense of fear around him, because of how Ash behaved, cold and distant towards everyone. Though deep inside, he was working on it, trying to change, trying to learn how to act with the same level of respect and warmth toward everyone, regardless of their standing. But, even though he was making the effort, no one really knew. No one could see that side of him. So, the videos of Ash and Ray's fight were receiving way too much attention in the Academy forum, even after more than a week has passed by. The feed was blowing up, comments exploding faster than popcorn in a hot pan. At Firespell 9000. Ash is like a damn monster, effer. One time I saw him up close, and my whole body just froze. I've never felt that kind of fear. Not even during my first monster encounter. Talon Edge. Yeah, his aura is cold and detached, like he's just above everything. He's the epitome of fear. I swear most students avoid eye contact just so he doesn't notice them. At rain check later. But that's exactly what makes him cool, right? I mean, cold, untouchable, and scarily charming. Like a storm in human form. At Zephyrvex. No cap. Bro looks like he walked out of a nightmare and decided to chill in our class. At Void Theory. Yo, hold up. You guys saw the video, right? Ash beat Ray. I can't freaking believe it. Ash was a hidden monster all along. Like a dark horse no one bet on. Can you even process that? At Celestial_T. Did you all see how handsome Ash looked during the fight? I swear, I felt like my heart was gonna leap right out of my mouth. Like, damn. At Ash Fan Club Official. Ash is so cool and distant and mysterious. I can't get my mind off him at all. He's like the cold winter wind that cuts but still makes you miss it after it passes. At RaySimp_94. Okay, okay. Calm down. Ray is also cool and charming, alright? You traitors are switching sides just because Ash pulled off some crazy moves. And don't forget, Ray almost won. Did you even see how Ash was just running around like a monkey dodging left and right? Ray had the edge. At RaySimp_94. Ray was ranked #1 for a reason, and he still is. All of you are fake fans. At SaltMage_23. Where the hell did these two even come from? I swear, they're ruining the whole vibe with this fake drama. The Thread Sniper. Yo, chill. I know why they're salty. After Ash showed off that sacred aura, the girls they had a crush on suddenly switched lanes and became full-on Ash fangirls. These guys are just jealous. At Celestial_T. LOL. It's actually so sad. At Mana Dealer. LOL. No cap. They really are just pitiful. At Ash Fan Club Official. But seriously though, the fight was way too close. It was neck and neck. Honestly, anyone could have won. But Ash pulled through because I think, deep down, he was just stronger, more desperate, more willing to go that far. At RaySimp_94. Ray all the way. He's the future of this continent. You clowns. At Ash Fan Club Official. Ash is the strongest, you tasteless dimwits. Grow some eyes. At Mana Dealer. Yo, can we all calm down? Why are we fighting like this? Isn't it obvious that Ash is stronger right now? That's a fact. But let's not forget, before this, Ray used to be stronger, which makes Ash's win even more insane. He surpassed him. At SaltMage_23. I cannot believe I'm surrounded by such fools. Stop acting like Ray's some side character. Don't forget he has all affinities. When the real future arrives, he's going to crush everyone with overwhelming power. A Void Theory. That guy's an idiot. Ash can't even be compared to Ray's future self, because Ash's future self would have already crushed it. At Celestial_T. You're the idiot. Ray's talent is so rare that people used to think it was a myth. Ash's future self will shudder in front of Ray. Just wait. At Ash Fan Club Official. Shut it. Your future Ray won't even be able to stand straight when Ash gets serious. At SaltMage_23. Well, at least we can all agree that the person above me is definitely an idiot. At Mana Dealer. You're the idiot, idiot. While some argued in the comments about who was stronger between Ray and Ash, the real chaos erupted in a different direction altogether. Especially in the girls' corner of the battlefield, where the debate took a wildly different turn. At Luna Blush. Hey, did you all see how Ash just appeared out of nowhere and smacked Ray down? Like for real? That guy is built different. He vanished like a ghost. Then boom. Ray was on the floor before we even blinked. Cherry Sparks. Ugh. My heart was beating like crazy that day. I'm telling you, I thought I was gonna pass out right there in the crowd. But seriously, that cold glare, the way he moved, he was just so effortlessly cool and handsome. Like, dangerously cool. A dream in eco. I think I'm in love. No. It's definitely love at second sight. At Crimson Thorns. What a crazy bitch. Are you really exchanging love interests like changing outfits? You were fangirling over Ray just last week. Where's your loyalty, huh? Also, yes, Ash is so blindingly handsome. My poor eyes can't take it. A Salty Duck. Look at this hypocritical bastard. Don't you see people changing lovers like they're changing clothes at a clothing sale? Cheap. At Crimson Thorns. What, bitch? Wanna fight? A Salty Duck. Yeah. I'll take you down in a duel, you whore. Tea with Glory. Keep it down, will you too? Why are you fighting like that? Did you forget Ash fought because of Alicia? At Velvet Dusk. I feel jealous of Alicia. What does she have that made the two top strongest students in the academy fight because of her? A Fairy Kiss. For real. At Melting Clouds. But hey, isn't it just insanely cool that Ash fought for his love like a real Prince Charming? My heart can't take it. Toxic Roses. What are you, living in a fantasy tale? Expecting a prince to come riding in on a white horse? Damn. Now I'm getting a nosebleed just thinking about Ash, riding a white horse in that black uniform. It raises my heart. What are you even saying, you all cheap background extras with no standards? Ray is the best, and he's the most handsome. I love Ray deeply. I'm gonna be the one to console him and make him fall for me. It's softly screaming. Hey, don't go telling people that. I'm already planning to find Ray and help him overcome his feelings. He hasn't even attended a single class after the duel. I'm seriously getting worried about him. Cherry sparks. Yeah. If anyone finds my prince, please tell him I'm waiting for him. At Velvet Dusk. Me too. At Dreaminico. Me 3. Looking at the comments on the video uploaded by various students, Ray sighed and put his phone down, letting it rest beside him as he continued to gaze at the empty sky, filled with clear weather, with bright sunlight gently spilling across the horizon. Lying on the grass among wildflowers and soft blades of green, under the cool shade of a large tree, Ray was lost in thought. After losing the duel with Ash, he came to this secret place of his, one he had discovered during his early exploration of the massive forest surrounding Starlight Academy. It was a very inconspicuous location, buried deep within the Academy's forest, so far in that one could easily lose their way. The deeper parts of this forest weren't just thick and tangled. There were also a few stronger monsters lurking around here. Yeah, it was still part of the Academy's grounds, but the forest was untamed, filled with creatures that weren't too strong or too weak, but they were strong enough to give immature kids who just joined the Academy a brutal reality check, without actually killing them. But all of this wasn't enough for Ray, who was already stronger than most of his peers. I feel like shit. He wasn't attending any classes, and honestly, he was in no mood at all to show up. His mind was a chaotic mess, filled with nothing but images of Alicia, her face, her smile, her voice. Every moment he had spent trying to make her feel special, every tiny conversation they had, no matter how small. It kept replaying in his mind like a broken record. But every time that thought bloomed inside his heart, it brought nothing but a deep, soul-wrenching frustration. His chest felt tight, his heart ached, like someone was stabbing it over and over. Nothing felt the same anymore. The world had lost its color. Everything became lackluster. They were never officially in a relationship, true, but only those who have faced rejection can truly understand this pain. Only those who have gone through this kind of heartbreak can understand just how much of a confidence breaker it is, how much of a slow, creeping mental torture that experience becomes. It is so damn hard to swallow when someone tries too hard to win over that one girl, when someone does everything in their power just to see her smile, when someone gives their all just to feel worthy, just to be noticed, just to matter to her. And at the end of it all, when that one girl turns away, when she looks at someone else, when she rejects you, whether it's a soft friend zone or a brutal, cold refusal, it hits different, crushes you. It's hard to face anyone after that. Should I die? No, I can't. I haven't fulfilled my revenge against the demon who killed my parents. My soul won't rest before I kill him. Ray just wanted to disappear, to hide away from everyone and everything, to vanish from the world, never to face another soul again. But his ambition, his burning desire to avenge his parents, to tear apart the monster that destroyed his family, that motivation was too deeply carved into his heart. It was a fire that refused to die, and so he couldn't end his life. Not yet. I don't know. I just feel empty. My heart is aching, but my tears won't stop. My throat feels dry even though I'm not speaking. My breathing becomes rough even though I'm not running. I didn't know it hurts this much. It's different. The pain I'm feeling right now is far more confusing and unbearable than the pain I felt when my parents died. For the past full week, Ray had done nothing but sit in misery, wailing, screaming inside, silently suffering as his emotions clawed at his insides. He felt betrayed, but deep down, he knew he couldn't blame her. He didn't expect much to begin with. He knew what he was getting himself into. He knew the ending might not be beautiful. He still went through with it. He followed what his heart whispered. And now he had learned the hard way that the heart is fragile, way too fragile. There is a saying goes that says, if it stays, it's love. If it ends, it's love story. And if it never begins, it's poetry. Hey, Etheris, I am listening. Do you remember anything about gods? Looking at the sky blankly, he asked, sprawled in the grass. His eyes were unfocused, staring into nothingness. I don't. For now, that is. I see. When my mother was alive, she used to say that everything that happens in the world is the will of the gods, whether it is good or bad, and that every bad thing teaches you something, and every good thing is a reward for your efforts. Is it true? Is it true that everything happens with the will of gods? Etheris was silent for a long, long time, and after thinking for quite a while, he finally answered, No, I don't think that everything happens with the will of gods. I see, it's good then. I was thinking that if everything did indeed happen with the will of gods, then doesn't that make God the greatest sinner? Oh. For how long are you going to live like this, in this miserable state? But in the end, even Etheris went silent. Being connected to Ray's soul and feeling everything he was feeling was not something pleasant. In fact, it was hard to endure. That kind of pain, the heavy weight of everything breaking inside, that kind of emptiness. It slowly spreads and it doesn't let go easily. So, in the end, he said nothing more. Just staying quiet, remaining by Ray's side, keeping him company without any more words. He knew, rather than trying to force healing with words or wisdom, it was better to let time do its work. Because there is no magic that can heal the wounds of love, and there is no medicine that can treat the disease named love. Love is the only medicine that can heal the wounds caused by love, and the sole cure of the disease named love. And right now, he had none. Just then a voice called him out. I knew you would be here. I knew you would be here. Hearing those words, Ray turned to his side and saw someone he never would have expected to see. His heart ached even more, and it was burning. Burning with what? Ray didn't know. He didn't know if it was anger, jealousy, confusion, or something else entirely that was bubbling inside his chest. He didn't know what to feel towards Ashburn, dressed in all black with strange, unfamiliar symbols etched across his clothes, adorned with gloves and a long cloak fluttering faintly with the breeze, and a single black earring hanging from his left ear. From his appearance alone, it was clear. He wasn't here just to talk. He looked like someone prepared for something serious. Lifting his upper body up from the ground, Ray sat slightly upright, his eyes unfocused, but within them lingered a subtle hint of wariness. His voice was low, dry, and somewhat hollow as he asked, What do you want now? Nothing, Ash replied, his voice calm as he stood still in front of him. Ray frowned the moment he heard the reply. For him, Ash was already marked as the enemy. He was the reason everything went wrong in his life. Everything that spiraled out of control. From the power he was supposed to rise to the love he was holding on to with so much hope. And when it came to love, there are always scars left behind. Especially between the boy who got rejected and the one whose presence made that rejection happen. Gritting his teeth, holding back the chaos swirling inside him with inhuman patience, Ray asked once more, Then why are you here? Ash noticed the subtle hesitation in his voice, the cracks beneath his calm tone. He could see the unspoken bitterness hiding in the way Ray held himself back, and he understood. These feelings weren't light. They were heavy. They were bitter, and Ash knew that whatever existed between him and Ray would only grow more complicated with time, not simpler. Human emotions, and the relationships they form, they were always difficult to maintain. They were fragile like glass. A single mistake could shatter them completely, and a single moment of clarity could make them shine like crystal. Without saying anything else, Ash walked past Ray, not responding directly. He leaned on the thick trunk of the tree behind Ray, but facing the opposite direction. Their positions now mirrored two distant paths, one looking east and the other west. One was leaning quietly on the tree, while the other remained on the ground, looking up at the sky, lost in thought. Ash quietly removed himself from Ray's line of sight, not out of disrespect, but because he had seen the storm behind those eyes, the tightly held restraint, the quiet but intense anger, and the confusion swirling just beneath it. To not provoke those buried emotions any further, he simply stepped out of view, giving Ray the space he needed. I sometimes forget that I am older than him mentally. I just came to check on you, Ash said softly. Ray scoffed in response, the bitterness clear in his voice. Check what? Do you want to see how miserable I am? Or do you want to see me crying? What a strange fetish you have there. His words came out mocking, with a cruel bite to them, aimed more at pushing Ash away than actually accusing him. But Ash didn't react. His expression didn't change. He simply replied in the same calm tone. It would be a lie to say that I wasn't curious about how you were doing, but seeing you gaze at the sky like this, instead of rampaging all around in anger, I think you're doing far better than I expected. What do you think I am? A berserker? Don't slander me without any proof, Ray muttered through clenched teeth, his voice low but full of bitterness. Ash didn't respond to the jab directly. Instead, his voice dropped a little, his tone more somber than before, as if something heavy was weighing on his chest. Anyway, I'm here to ask you a question. Or you could say, I came to request something from you. Ray didn't react immediately. His mood hadn't changed. The ache in his chest was still present, the anger still simmering beneath his skin. But he was curious about what the unknown, the only other person who knew about the system, wanted to ask him. After a few minutes of long silence, Ray finally spoke. Ask away. I'm going on an expedition to kill some demons, so I just wanted to ask, if you would like to come? Just say yes, just say yes. Ash was hoping, no, silently pleading, that Ray would agree. After all, this was not something he asked lightly. Ash had finally made up his mind to involve Ray too, and the reason behind his choice was simple. As the Whisperer had warned, there was a real chance that even the Saints could fall under the control of the Hollow Mother. And while Ash might be able to revive again and again, regardless of how many times he died, it would still be nothing short of delusional to believe that he alone could save millions of innocent people. Especially when those people would be facing not just demons, but controlled dwarves whose population was mixed with normal people and awakened individuals whose ranks were unknown. And in the middle of that chaos, he would also have to defeat the Hollow Mother. It would be impossible. Ash wasn't powerful enough to take that kind of risk alone. Not anymore. And now that he had made the decision to try to truly save lives this time, he couldn't just walk into this with half a heart. If he was going to save even a fraction of them, he had to give everything he had. That's why, while fighting against those who were below the level of a saint, the best possible choice was Ray. Especially now that Ray had acquired the Indomitable Mantle skill. That one skill alone made Ray nearly invincible against anyone below saint rank, at least until a domain was involved. But thankfully, there was good news buried in that mess. Domains were closely tied to the will and consciousness of the user, a manifestation of their inner strength. And when Hollowborns took control of someone, their own consciousness, their soul, their intent, was pushed deep into the background, overtaken by the overwhelming will of the Hollow Mother or either obliterated. Because of that, the controlled individual couldn't use their domain, not even a fragment of its power, which meant that even though they might retain their stats and fighting skills, they were reduced to little more than strong, high-ranked bodies with no true control over their powers. And if Ray, someone who could withstand attacks from saints, joined the fight, then everything would change. With Ray holding the front line, Ash could focus all his power on killing the Hollow Mother with his life affinity, without worrying about being overwhelmed by sheer force. "No," Ray replied with cold clarity. And once again, silence fell between them. A heavy, dragging silence, like a void between two worlds. "Millions of people will die," Ash whispered softly, his voice quiet but steady. "Among those millions, there might be children, parents and elderly people who won't even understand what's happening. And the only one who can come with me to help them is you, because while others might fall, you won't. You are the only one who's safe. Your help can mean one more life saved, one more family spared. Are you sure you don't want to help? Ray's expression faltered for a heartbeat, just a flicker of hesitation in his eyes. But then, as if retreating into himself again, the same distant and hollow look returned. How can I believe you? Ray muttered under his breath. You might be trying to use me in some twisted way I don't understand, and I don't want to be used again. I'm done with all of that. So my answer is still, no. Just go away and leave me alone. He laid back down again, resting his head against the cold grass, staring up at the drifting clouds above as if they held more comfort than any human ever could. Then came a deep, quiet sigh from behind the tree, a soft exhale heavy with the weight of secrets. And after that, the voice returned, no longer asking, no longer begging. If you help me, I will tell you why the demons attacked your small village. I will tell you why your parents died that day, and who the demon was that killed them. Ash was not able to finish his words, as he teleported away, and just as his figure vanished, the tree behind him exploded into fragments of dust and flying bark, leaving behind only silence and a crater. Ray was now standing where Ash had just been, fists clenched and glowing with an earthen sheen. His jaw tightened, and his eyes trembling with a cocktail of rage and disbelief. He glared at Ash, who had reappeared just a short distance away. You? Who are you really? How do you know so much? Ray was practically screaming at him, but hidden inside that voice was something far more fragile than fury, a helpless plea, one that yearned for nothing else but answers he had spent years chasing in the dark. Sigh. I didn't want him to get all worked up like this. I really wasn't planning to say anything, not when the topic is this sensitive, but alas, he didn't agree. And now I have no choice but to use this method. I just know. Now decide. Will you help me kill demons and save millions of people, while also learning the truth behind everything that has haunted you every single day? Or will you continue to stay here like this pathetically, drowning in your own misery? Ash spoke in his same nonchalant tone, as if none of this really mattered to him, but he was hiding his real feelings behind the mask of indifference. But then, Ray laughed, a strange laugh that didn't match the situation at all, as he slowly raised a hand to cover his face. Ha ha, ha ha, I am really an idiot. Ha ha, ha ha. I always thought that once I grew strong enough, I'd uncover all the answers. I believed that with power, I could find the truth about why demons attacked my village, when not a single other attack had happened anywhere else at that time. I wanted nothing else but to bathe in the blood of the demon who killed my parents. I lived for that day, but... Ha ha, ha ha, I really am an idiot. He lowered his hand, and the faint smile that had lingered was gone, replaced with an emotionless expression, cold and unreadable. The day I realized there was someone out there who knew about me, more than I even knew myself, I should have understood. I should have known that such a person would also have answers about why my parents were attacked. I feel stupid for not realizing that sooner. And I am not going anywhere. I'll get those answers from you anyway, after I beat the shit out of you. And this time, there's no lightning in the sky for you to rely on. He summoned Etheris, and black and green energy surged into his hands, painting the air with his intent. Oh! Ash looked a little shocked, though not overly surprised. His lips curled slightly in amusement. Pray tell me, how exactly do you plan on doing that? I don't think you can even catch me if I decide not to be caught. And when it comes to defeating you, lightning is far from the only method I have at my disposal. Do you want to try? The tension reached its peak, and then, just as the tension reached its peak and was about to explode, Ray dismissed his weapon and took a deep breath. And then, looking at Ash with the same intensity as before, he asked, "What are the powers of the demon?" Hearing that question, Ash smiled faintly as he thought, A wise choice. Just like that, Ash recruited Ray to save the Dwarven continent. Dwarven continent. At the very edge of the human continent, there stood various mountains that stretched far and wide as if they had no visible end, sprawling so endlessly that they seemed to touch the skies themselves. These mountains had long become a haven for ores, hidden ruins, and rich mineral veins, mines that sustained the dwarves for centuries. And right at the edge of that land, two 15-year-old boys were standing quietly. Both were draped in black clothing, layered with gloves, cloaks, and masks that completely hid their identities. The only visible difference between the two was in their outfits. One wore plain black garments with a barely perceptible white sheen glowing softly beneath the surface, while the other's clothes were inscribed with mysterious runic symbols that shimmered faintly when touched by light. "I don't understand. Why are we even wearing the masks?" Ray asked in a frustrated tone, already second-guessing his choices. Just hearing what kind of demon they were going to fight had shaken him enough. Or perhaps it would be more accurate to say the kind of creature. And now, on top of that, they had to wear these uncomfortable outfits that didn't make things any better. "To hide our identity, of course," Ash replied instantly, not even pausing for a moment. "From whom?" "Demons. Although I doubt our actions will stay hidden for long. It's just cool, I think." Ray stopped mid-step and stared at Ash, blinking as if he was seeing him for the first time in his life. Noticing that look, Ash awkwardly coughed and quickly shifted his focus. "You remember everything I told you, right?" "Yeah," Ray replied, his voice a little annoyed, not liking the fact that he was together with Ash. Before coming here, Ash had already explained everything to Ray, about the Hollow Mother and the Hollowborn, the mind and body control, and the risks they carried. Of course, he left out the part about why he was really here, to obtain the rune, and to make sure Ray stayed safe and immune against the Hollowborn's influence. He had asked if Ray still had any system points left. If he did, then he should purchase a skill that could block the parasitic invasion and eliminate them. But if Ray didn't have any points remaining, Ash had planned to visit the Elven continent for making Ray some sort of charm instead. In the end, Ray purchased the skill from the shop. The skill Ray purchased worked through life mana. It was an active skill that consumed a lot of mana as Ray did not have life affinity, so the burden was quite high, but its toll could be made bearable with the help of the Indomitable Mantle skill. Although there was no ability in Indomitable Mantle skill that converted that absorbed force into mana, but Ash told Ray that his skill is more versatile than it appears, and the absorbed force can be converted into mana. And then, with some practice, he was indeed able to do it. That was the reason Ray's body had a faint white sheen. The skill was already partially charged and running beneath his skin. The name of the skill Ray purchased was Life Breath. It wasn't a too powerful ability, but it was enough to confirm Ray's basic safety against the Hollowborn's effects. Otherwise, things could quickly become horrifying. If Ray were to get controlled like a puppet and start attacking Ash under the Hollow Mother's influence, it would become a pain in the ass to handle the situation like that. I just hope, with Ray here, everything will go well, and luck will shine today. Ash had not gone to the Elven Kingdom for help, despite what he had told the Whisperer. He could use life mana himself, and there was no need to disturb the newly crowned Elf Queen. Besides, Ash seriously doubted her help would have made much difference when Ray was already standing beside him. They didn't waste much time wandering around either. Once they reached a safe point, Ash grabbed Ray by the shoulder, and the two of them began teleporting from place to place. When they finally reached a point near the city, they waited there quietly for Ash's mana to recover, before finally stepping toward their destination. As soon as Ash appeared in the city again, he once more felt that same nagging sense of danger and unease, the same discomfort, even though nothing was near them. Even Ray immediately shifted into serious mode. His body language subtly changed, becoming tense and alert, as if he was ready to face an invisible enemy lurking in the air. Ignoring him, Ash gazed at the city below. They were standing on one of the rocks protruding from the side walls of the underground city. The city looked the same. Nothing seemed different from what he remembered. The buildings where he was attacked were still damaged, and the large water tank at the other end remained just as twisted and disfigured. Taking a deep breath, Ash activated his elemental sight. He remembered what the Whisperer had told him, that Hollowborns could only be seen by someone who was able to perceive the true flow of mana in the environment. And when he heard that back then, the only skill that came to his mind was elemental sight. From what he knew and had experienced, elemental sight allowed him to perceive the movement of mana in the surroundings. He could see the mana particles, the way they danced and moved around, how they twisted and flowed through space. And so he wanted to try it, to see if it would work here as well. A small eye-shaped symbol appeared on Ash's glabella, glowing faintly. His vision shifted instantly. The sensation of that change was strange, different from what he had felt when using Snow's X-ray vision. This time, it wasn't just about looking deeper. It was like gazing at the very breadth of the world, the hidden reality beneath everything. And what he saw, curse it all, what the hell is this? In this colorful world revealed by elemental sight, the entire underground area was drowned in an overwhelming shadow. No matter where his eyes moved, there was only darkness, spreading endlessly, as if a massive black blanket had been thrown over the entire city, suffocating everything beneath it. But that wasn't all. Thread-like black beings were also squirming nearby. They were tiny, almost imperceptible, but Ash could feel them clearly now. They were trying to creep through the small patches of his visible skin, even trying to enter through his breath. But each time they entered, they were eliminated instantly, burned away by life mana within him. The Hollowborns were far too small for him to fully see. Their shapes were lost in the shadows. What elemental sight showed him wasn't their actual appearance. It was only the faint, demonic energy they carried within them. That energy, it's the same one I felt when the heads and hearts of the dwarves exploded back then. But then, just as he processed that thought, everything shifted. Ash suddenly felt as if time slowed down, and a chill that had nothing to do with temperature ran down his spine. Because he felt it. He felt millions of gazes fall on him all at once, eyes filled with nothing but pure, overwhelming murderous intent. In truth, there was only one. Hidden somewhere deep within the endless darkness, the Hollow Mother had locked her gaze onto him. But the sheer depth of that one gaze was so oppressive, so vast and unnatural, that it created the illusion that countless Hollowborns were watching him, crawling under his skin, pressing down on his very soul. The pressure was unbearable. His body stiffened. His thoughts trembled for a moment, and his face slowly turned grim. Ah, damn. I never thought they would sense even this. Activating absolute concealment, Ash teleported away with Ray to the opposite end this time, and as soon as he reappeared, he noticed something strange. The place he had just appeared became completely clear of Hollowborns, as if his sudden movement had repelled them, pushing them away with some invisible force. And then, something clicked inside his mind, like a distant switch being flipped in the background of his thoughts. I see, the Hollow Mother can't see me. It was just sensing the place where its children were being cleared, and creating a gap in its huge curtain of darkness. It wasn't sensing me directly, it was sensing the movement of its own children. What happened? Ray asked, his voice cautious and alert, because he had clearly noticed how Ash suddenly became tense and alert, as if something unexpected had happened. But nothing. Focus on the task. Ash muttered under his breath, not wanting to go into details just yet. The reason Ash had returned to the city again was simple. Ash wanted to check if the Hollow Mother was actually hiding in this city. And now, with the help of elemental sight, the process would become much easier. If she really was here, then there would be no need to travel all the way to the central city. But if not, then Ash would simply trace the Hollow Mother through her children, through the Hollowborns, by sensing the same twisted energy they carried. The plan was simple, nothing too complex, and thus they quietly went to work on it. The atmosphere was eerily calm. The silence was suffocating, and even breathing felt like a chore. The city was completely different from what Ray had thought he would see, although Ash had already told him about the Hollow Mother and how it controls the bodies of people like puppets, using them to spread its reach. Ray was still not entirely sure about his words, not until he saw it for himself. As soon as they entered the city, the air turned strange, heavy, and cold. It felt unnatural, like something invisible was pressing down on them. His chest felt tight, like he was breathing through a thin cloth soaked in fog. The only reason he was able to stay relatively composed was because of his skill, life breath, which was already activated. It was consuming a large amount of mana just to keep him somewhat comfortable, but even so, it was the only thing making him feel at least a little better. It wasn't false. Everything about the city felt wrong. There was no sound coming from the city ahead. No footsteps, no conversations, not even the rustle of the wind. The roads were completely empty. The houses stood still like lifeless shells. Every window was dark, and the doors were shut tight. Only the faint glow from the street lamps and a few flickering sources of light lit up the surroundings, casting eerie shadows across the walls and pavement. But aside from that, there was nothing. No presence. No movement. Only silence. I can feel it. This city really is like a horror movie. Then he saw it. Ash's body tensing beside him. And in the very next moment, Ash held his shoulder and both of them teleported straight to the other end of the underground city. Ray didn't know why Ash had done that, but he didn't question it. He had felt something too at that moment, a sudden, cold shiver that ran down his spine, as if the air itself was alive and watching them. He believed that was the reason for Ash's sudden movement. Shifting his gaze, Ray looked at Ash, who stood still like a statue. He wasn't moving at all, just standing there, eyes narrowed, as if trying to sense something beyond the surface. So he has started. The plan they made was simple. While Ash used his elemental sight to find the location of the Hollow Mother, Ray's role was to act as his shield and protect him. According to Ash, they might get attacked by anyone or maybe everyone. Even people who didn't have mana, the mundane citizens, might become their enemy. Of course, Ash could easily escape any amount of people with teleportation, but that would interrupt his focus, and he wouldn't be able to properly locate the Hollow Mother. That's why Ray had to guard him no matter what happened. But that was only the first step in their plan. Because as soon as Ash found the location, they were going to infiltrate the place head-on and kill the Hollow Mother directly. Yeah, it might sound stupid and reckless, and definitely something no sane person would try. After all, they were just two 15-year-old boys. One of them had only recently entered the master rank, while the other was officially still an adept, even though his true strength was no less than a master. Their comparison was only based on stats and a perfectly built foundation. Skills, techniques, battle experience, those were not factored in. If it were any ordinary 15-year-olds, it would have been impossible. But they weren't just anyone. One was the main protagonist, someone who possessed a system, and the other was supposed to be just an extra, a background character, but now was also a main protagonist and the bearer of the runes. Just then, Ray felt that the ground vibrated a little. He thought it was nothing but an illusion, a passing hallucination born from tension, but he was proven wrong because the shaking only intensified with time, becoming more and more noticeable with each second. Where both Ray and Ash were standing was an open field with nothing but rocks scattered in all directions. There were no buildings nearby, only patches of dry mud and rough stones here and there. It was a construction site cleared earlier to expand the underground city even further. But now this place was going to become a battlefield. On their back, there was nothing but a massive stone wall, the final boundary of the underground city. Behind that wall was nothing but rocks and mud. And from the front, a small dust cloud was continuing to grow larger and larger with each passing second, stretching and swirling, as if something enormous was charging forward towards them. And then he saw the shapes and figures of the people, at first faint, but becoming clearer with every blink, and they were truly numerous, far too many to count, their eyes vacant and lifeless, and their movements mechanical and perfectly synchronized with each other. Seeing the sheer quantity of people, an invisible pressure began piling up on Ray like a mountain pressing against his shoulders. His legs were trembling a little, and the same was true for his hands. Ray was feeling nervous, his thoughts in chaos, and even fear had begun to creep in, albeit very little, but enough to freeze his breath for a second. All his thoughts about Alicia vanished for now, shoved deep into the corners of his mind. Right now, he was not even sure what to do. It was his first time facing, or even seeing, such a large number of enemies. But in the next second, a slap resounded. Ray slapped himself, hard, to get himself under control, and immediately, the shaking stopped and his rationality returned, stabilizing the chaos that had started to form in his mind. What the hell am I getting scared for? Yeah, they feel creepy, but they are not dead. They are just being controlled, and I have to save them. And I should not fear the numbers, instead I should love them. The more enemies there are, the more attacks I will receive and the more useful my skill will become. As long as I am being mindful of its charge, stalling that much amount of people is not out of question, at least for a few minutes. Thinking like that, Ray started to move towards the incoming cloud of dust, his steps slow at first but gaining momentum. He removed his mask and threw it to the ground without hesitation, letting the damp air touch his face fully. It was uncomfortable wearing that mask. I don't know how he even wears it, rotating his neck a little to relieve the stiff tension in his muscles. Ray pondered for a moment. Hey Etheris, I doubt that even your previous master would have faced something like this. I am sure he has faced the situation of fighting against entire armies. After all, he was a godslayer. He must have fought through countless soldiers just to reach the gods, but I am not certain if those battles were fought at the same rank as yours. You and that boy Ash are just too broken, your strength defies logic, and I honestly feel bad if a normal person ever gets compared to either of you. Sometimes, I doubt that you both are even humans. I guess, then I am going to surpass that master of yours. You better start getting ready to accept me as your one and only master. As if, though you are my master now, no doubt about that. And yes, you have an enormous amount of talent. Something unheard of even among heroes and legends, no doubt again. But that still cannot gain my full approval. If you truly want to be acknowledged by me, not just wield me, but be worthy of my power, you will have to try much harder. It was not like, after gaining the approval of Etheris, Ray would suddenly unlock some hidden or divine power sealed inside the sword. It was nothing like that. Rather, it was a recognition, a silent yet eternal nod from the soul residing within the blade. A bond that, once formed, was impossible to break or fake. It was a promise of trust between a weapon that had once slain gods and the one daring to walk that same path again. Moving empty-handed, Ray created a sufficient distance between himself and Ash, making sure to give space for what was coming ahead, and then finally came to a stop. At the same time, the figures of the dwarves became clearer. With their short legs and big bellies, they were unmistakably dwarves, but something was very wrong. Some were carrying kitchen knives, others held hammers, and there were even a few with drinking mugs still clutched tightly in their hands. They were all dressed differently, wearing everything from cooking aprons to battle gear, and even casual clothes. At the forefront were all mundane people, simple civilians. There was no awakened in sight. What are the chances that there might be some awakened hidden there to launch a surprise attack? Ray was not sure, but Ash had told him to think of every worst situation as reality, because with his luck that will definitely happen. Ray was not too keen on following his words, but he still took his words seriously. Feelings aside, Ash has only spoken facts with him and nothing else. But it didn't matter whether there were awakened among them or not, because in the end, I will prevail. Because at the end of the day, they were only mundane humans, albeit in a horrifying quantity. But a swarm of ants still can't kill an elephant. Yeah, it might cause discomfort and even create problems, but still not enough to kill Ray. Ray was not going to use his sword. Instead, he brought out a blunt wooden sword, the kind used during training back at the academy. He had many of these tucked away in his space ring, stored for emergencies or practice. They are all alive, I just need to make them lose consciousness and nothing else. My work is simply to stall the incoming people, that's it. Let's stick to that role, for now at least. As the distance between them continued to shrink, and the tension built like a bowstring stretched taut, Ray exploded with power. Watching the hollows march towards him, Ray sucked in a cold breath, letting the icy air calm his wildly beating heart before he moved. I need to narrow their approach. The crowd was too large for him to hold off from all sides. Ray knew he could not contain such a wide area for long, so he had to somehow force the dwarfs into coming at him from a more limited direction. He quickly moved to the right side, his free hand surging with an orange glow. At the same time, he channeled part of his stored energy into his indomitable mantle skill to increase the power behind his swing. His left hand covered an aura blade carved through the air in a heavy, sweeping arc, carrying a devastating blend of orange and whitish light. Boom! The strike hit with enough force to shake the ground. Dust and debris flew upward in a violent spray, mixing with the already thick haze hanging over the battlefield until it felt like dust was raining from the sky itself, cloaking the right side in a suffocating cloud. Even though the dust blocked vision, Ray could sense the result of his attack with ease. Before reaching master rank, back when he was only an expert rank, he could only perceive his surroundings within a few dozen meters. Now, after breaking through, his senses had expanded to reach nearly 1 full kilometer, making it feel as if the ground and air themselves whispered their every movement to him. For most, the ability to sense one's surroundings only manifested at expert rank, but Ash was an exception, so he was already capable of it earlier whenever he activated Omni Thought or Lightning Reflex, both of which sharpened his perception to an unnatural degree. Through those heightened senses, Ray measured the destruction he had caused. A crater nearly 20 meters deep and at least 7 meters wide. It's enough! Deciding this gap was sufficient to keep the dwarfs from flanking him, Ray turned to the left and repeated the same maneuver. Another deep crater formed, the air again filling with dust until both flanks were concealed behind thick clouds. The cost had been steep, draining both his mana and the energy stored in his skill, though the latter had been used far more heavily. By then, the March of the Hollows was already closing in on him. There was no time to seal the front, not that he had been planning to. His skill required taking blows to store energy, and he doubted the scattered ranged attacks from mundane dwarfs would provide much in return. What he truly hoped for were their heavier weapons, ballista bolts, siege projectiles, or anything large enough to feed his reserves in one strike. In truth, a part of him was almost eager for those attacks. Still, he wanted to keep the number of enemies pressing him at once within a range he could handle. If he blocked the front too, there was no telling how many war missiles might be sent at him all at once, making it difficult to manage the chaos. So he left the front open. Now he would have to fight while keeping several things in mind: repelling the mundane dwarfs without killing them, staying alert for any unusual attacks hidden within the crowd, and tracking every long-range strike aimed his way. At the very least, with the flanks open in the front and him being engaging in close combat, the dwarfs would now have to think twice before firing recklessly into their own people. They might restrain their attacks for fear of friendly casualties. Or so he hoped. As soon as the distance between the hordes of who knows how many mundane dwarfs reached about 20 meters from Ray, he stepped forward. An earthen aura surged out from his body, flowing into his right leg, and with a devastating force he slammed it into the ground. Boom! Fissures spread outward from the point of impact, the ground cracking apart under the pressure. Dust exploded into the air in thick waves, while shards of stone and chunks of rock shot in every direction, veiling his figure within a haze of swirling debris. The balance of the crowd faltered for a moment, some dwarfs stumbling while others fell completely, their formation breaking apart. The fallen ones caused more to trip, creating a brief domino effect. However, after several collapsed, the rest learned to avoid that position, moving around their fallen kin to keep advancing. At the same time, vanishing completely from the sights of the hollow-controlled dwarfs, Ray reappeared in front of them using Flicker Step, his wooden sword slicing in a precise horizontal arc. Swish! A sharp, sickening crack of bone rang out, followed by the sight of a dwarf's belly deforming from the sheer force of the blow. The impact hurled the target backwards, smashing into several others and toppling them, clearing a large space in front of him. I used too much strength, I think. I need to lessen the force even more. Another dwarf lunged straight at him, but his body passed through Ray's form as if Ray was nothing more than a flickering illusion. Appearing behind another target, he struck with swift, fluid precision at the neck, knees, and joints, each blow designed to unbalance and topple them without inflicting fatal wounds. His body flickered from one position to another, instantly halting the momentum of the advancing horde. Dwarfs dropped one after another, some tripping over those already downed, while others were forced to the ground by the calculated strikes of his sword. His figure moved like an elegant master performing a deadly dance, each swing flowing into the next. The blade landed precisely on joints before sliding into a follow-up strike at the neck, or sometimes going straight for the neck from the start, all aimed to make them fall. But that was a mistake. In the first place, the dwarfs were not conscious. They were puppets, their minds chained and their bodies moved by another's will. How could they possibly lose consciousness? The ones who had fallen began to rise again, some dragging a limp leg, others standing as if they had never been struck at all. They are not getting unconscious. His thoughts remained calm. There was no room for questions about why or how. Those could be answered later. Right now, his mind was focused on only one thing: stopping them. Just like when he practiced his sword forms and his mind emptied of everything except the sword, the same focus now took hold. The noise of battle faded away in his thoughts, replaced only by the rhythm of his steps and strikes. An ocean-blue aura surged from his legs, flowing into the ground beneath the charging dwarfs. The earth softened under their feet without warning, their footing slipping away and their balance faltering. That single moment was enough for him to move in and strike at their legs. "Sorry, this might hurt, but I will get everyone a healer when all this is over." With that thought, the hesitation in his strikes vanished. The sound of bones breaking echoed again, and though the pain he caused was real, it was the lesser harm. He was protecting their lives even if they could not understand it now. In time, they would thank him for breaking their legs instead of their hands. For dwarfs, their hands were treasures beyond price. The hands that shaped metal, carved stone, and crafted wonders that could last lifetimes. Thus, a strange scene was unfolding in the underground city of the dwarfs. Hordes of them, of all kinds of ages, were flocking toward a narrow space that had large craters on both its sides, signs of the battle that had been raging here. In the midst of it all, a figure cloaked in black clothes, with golden eyes glowing faintly in the dim light, was moving like a phantom, flickering from one spot to another. Afterimages of his wooden sword flashed with each step, each swing striking with such precision that the dwarfs he passed crumpled to the ground, their legs broken before they even understood what had happened. The fallen began to pile together, forming an unintentional barrier, a natural dam that blocked the way and caused many of the mindless hollows to stumble and fall. But soon enough, even that obstacle was trampled over as the rest stepped on the fallen without hesitation, ignoring the crushed limbs beneath their feet, their vacant eyes showing no sign of recognition or mercy. Ray saw this, and the heart that had been beating wildly in his chest like a beast desperate to break free suddenly turned cold. That sight, the sheer ruthlessness in it, it was enough to send a chill down his spine. He pushed himself faster, his movements growing sharper and more relentless, until from the eyes of a mundane human his speed was simply impossible to follow. The rate at which the dwarfs were being taken down only increased, the rhythm of his strikes turning into a constant flow of motion. He neither received any of their attacks nor tried to absorb them, for they were far too slow to even reach him in the first place, and so avoiding them was effortless. At this point, he was simply waiting for any ranged attack or sudden ambush that would allow him to increase the stored energy percentage of his skill. But so far, until now, nothing had happened. Just as that thought crossed his mind, his senses suddenly flared. He caught the faint but sharp sound of something cutting through the air toward him at a speed that would have been invisible to most eyes. A faint smile formed in his mind, though his expression remained hidden beneath the hood. "Ah! I was waiting for that!" Feeling something approaching at an astonishing speed, Ray swept his wooden sword, its blade now covered in a swirling green aura. Instead of delivering a devastating slash, the swing released a powerful burst of wind that sent many of the advancing dwarfs flying backward, scattering them like leaves in a storm. The wooden sword broke due to the aura, but it created a short breather for Ray, no more than a few seconds, but he did not waste it. Without hesitation, He bent his knees and leapt high into the air, straight toward the incoming projectile. As his body soared upward, his sharp eyes locked on the strange object. It had an unusual shape, a long cuboidal body with a conical top, spinning rapidly as it accelerated toward him, gathering more and more force with each passing moment. It's a mana missile. Even as Ray's leap carried him higher, the mana missile adjusted its course mid-flight, tracking him with unnerving precision. He barely had time to register that thought before, boom! An explosion ripped through the air, the shockwave sending a hot blast of wind in all directions. Seconds later, a figure emerged from the smoke, descending gracefully despite the burnt patches on his black clothing. Ray landed lightly on the cracked stone ground, right in front of the relentless horde. I have at least recovered the energy that I used for life breath. Life breath was a skill that consumed enormous amounts of energy. If Ray had to fight while using it constantly to shield himself from the unknown parasites in the air, his mana reserves would be drained within 2 to 3 minutes. Only after combining it with Indomitable Mantle had he managed to extend that time to nearly 10 minutes. And right now, thanks to the explosion, he had recovered all the energy he had lost. Without wasting even a second, Ray surged forward again. Though many bodies lay scattered behind him, none were dead. He continued pressing deeper into the enemy ranks, determined to push them back. His goal was simple, to keep the dwarfs from stepping on the ones already down, at least for as long as he could. He avoided overusing his earth manipulation. The ground beneath the horde was softened just enough to slow their advance, but not so much that they would sink completely. If he did that, it was likely the mind-controlled dwarfs behind them would resort to extreme measures, perhaps even attacking their own just to reach him. After all, they were not in their right minds. They had no emotions, which meant emotional manipulation was useless. Just then, his senses sharpened again. 2 more projectiles came screaming toward him. Like before, he absorbed their energy effortlessly. Since the missiles had a tracking function, he did not need to worry about perfect timing. They both struck him at the same moment. But the next attack brought a twist. As Ray leapt to meet it, 3 projectiles were coming his way, and one was streaking toward Ash, who stood unmoving, eyes open yet seemingly lost in trance. Shit! Cursing under his breath, Ray summoned Etheris. The God Slayer appeared in his grasp, and with a powerful throw, it soared into the air. The blade curved mid-flight as though guided by its own will, intercepting the mana missile in a single sweeping cut. Boom! Boom! 2 explosions erupted almost simultaneously, lighting the underground space in a brief, blinding flash. As Ray landed, Etheris floated down beside him, hovering at his side. It's really convenient that you can move on your own. Of course it is. That's why I kept telling you to become stronger faster. But even I did not expect you to reach master rank this fast, unlocking this ability. As if only you and I know how many times I had to sneak out of the academy just to enter high-ranking dungeons. And after my first time going to a dungeon, Master made leaving the academy even more difficult. Muttering his complaint, Ray threw himself back into the fight, his figure flickering from place to place as his sword precisely targeted knees, ankles, and joints, breaking the dwarf's legs to keep them from advancing further. Just like that, few minutes passed. Is he still not done yet? The thought crossed Ray's mind as he landed, his breathing steady despite the chaos unfolding around him. The number of missiles was steadily increasing, and at times they even crossed paths mid-air, causing one to spiral off course and explode among the civilians. Etheris darted forward at full speed to intercept one such missile, but it had been launched from far too great a distance. The sword could not reach it in time. Ray's chest had tightened painfully at the sight. Anger burned within him toward whoever was controlling the dwarfs. He had been holding himself back, breaking only leg bones and in ways that would heal without lasting damage. He refused to take lives. But people were dying anyway, and the one pulling the strings clearly did not care. Damn! The curses rolled through his mind, but his thoughts remained chillingly cold. Another wave of dwarfs, more projectiles incoming, when a voice called from behind. Let's go. I found the location. For Ash, once Ray began shielding him, his focus shifted almost entirely to the black motes drifting through the air. They were surging toward him, slipping into his body one after another, but to no effect. While invisible to most, the scene, if anyone could see it, would have looked like a massive, writhing swarm of insects forcing their way into Ash's body. A sight unsettling enough to turn anyone pale. Ash tried his best to ignore it, though the sensation was far from pleasant. Having something enter your body was never exactly comforting. That did not sound right. Regardless, it was hard to concentrate on tracking the Hollow Mother when that was happening. All he had to do was find something that stood out, something that did not belong, and that would most likely be the source. It took him a few minutes just to tear his mind away from the crawling intrusion. Not even Omni-Thought was any help this time. In fact, it only made things worse, feeding him darker possibilities instead of distracting him. Once he managed to clear his head, the search did not take long. He could sense an immense concentration of mana, along with a gathering of Hollowborns, in a single location. That mana should belong to all awakened in the city. I doubt any of the ones attacking Ray have man. Deactivating his elemental sight left a faint strain in his temples, but he pushed it aside and looked toward Ray. He was still fighting with sharp, elegant precision, even though the whole thing was a pointless dance. What was the point of fighting when you could not use your full strength? That's why I brought him with me. He's doing his part well. Now I just have to do mine better. Let's go, I found the location. Saying that, he appeared next to Ray and teleported away. Before leaving though, Ash destroyed the incoming missiles with snake lightning, detonating them midair in bursts of blinding sparks that lit up the underground city for a fleeting heartbeat. They reappeared exactly where they had first arrived upon entering the city. Ash's gaze shifted toward the tunnel entrance ahead. It was the same tunnel he had first come through, and he never would have thought there would be anything hidden here, and in a way he had been right. Even for someone as unusually paranoid as Ash, this was beyond his expectations. Though, this deeper underground, he could feel it, a restless mass of Hollowborns below, and not just them. There were people too. Is it here? Ray asked, his face serious. All his earlier dissatisfaction about working with Ash had faded, replaced by the focus of someone who understood the weight of the situation. He still did not like him, but there were reasons for that. Their relationship was more of a deal. Ray would help Ash and in return get answers. Even so, he had grown far more serious about the task than when they had first started. Yeah, I believe somewhere in the tunnels there's a way downwards, Ash replied. Will we have to find it? Ray asked. I'm not too keen on searching for it though. Same for me. Let me make a way then. Ray stepped forward, channeling the energy discharge of his mantle skill twice in quick succession. Boom, boom. The ground beneath them throbbed like a living heartbeat, swelling, cracking, and then collapsing entirely. Both of them plunged into the yawning darkness below. Ah, damn, we're falling again, Ash thought, as they fell, dodging debris and jagged shards of rock tumbling alongside them. The darkness felt endless. Then, a sudden light flared to life as Ash muttered, "Flare." Lightning rippled through the air, scattering motes of glowing energy in every direction. The sparks floated and twisted through the void, drifting alongside Ash and Ray as they continued their descent. The glow was enough to reveal the ground far below, and the nightmare waiting there. Seeing it, both Ash and Ray cursed internally. A dim, ghastly scene revealed itself as the light from Ash's skill spilled across the ground below. In the center of the cavern sat the Hollow Mother, looming like a rotting brain torn from some impossible giant, its grotesque mass of flesh towering as high as a two-story building. The surface was a sickly, raw red, glistening as if drenched in oil. Vein-like tendrils as thick as tree roots sprawled outward from its base, crawling across the stone floor and burrowing deep into the earth. They pulsed faintly in uneven rhythms, as though something unseen in the depths was feeding it. Dozens upon dozens of swollen eyes jutted from folds in its body. None moved in unison. Each rolled in erratic directions, scanning the cavern in twitching bursts. Some were no larger than a fist, while others were as wide as a man's head. Their slick surfaces caught the light with a glassy sheen, reflecting a hunger that felt both alien and deliberate. Between the clusters of eyes, the flesh twisted into deep creases and swollen ridges, forming patterns like the folds of some diseased, nightmarish brain. From gaping pores scattered across its surface, clouds of thick, black smoke puffed out in slow, unsettling bursts. The fumes drifted upward toward the cavern's ceiling, where several narrow holes, just wide enough for 2 or 3 people to pass through, broke through the rock. Through those openings, the smoke vanished into the outside world. Ash quickly realized these were the same routes the worms had been using to blend to the surface air. What a disturbing sight! The Whisperer had already told him what the Hollow Mother looked like, so the horror was not a complete surprise. Even so, seeing it in person was different. It was smaller than the one in the Whisperer's account, perhaps weaker than what he encountered, but its sheer presence was enough to make the skin crawl. And it was not alone. Beyond the Hollow Mother and the endless darkness surrounding it, shapes began to take form in Ash's vision. Dozens, no, thousands of dwarves stood in the shadows. They did not move with the rhythm of the living. Their posture was rigid, their eyes dull, their bodies wrapped in the unnatural stillness of mind control. Ash narrowed his eyes, letting Omni-thought flow through him. In mere seconds, he gauged the scale of the force gathered here. 1 at legendary rank, 5 at Grandmaster, 10 at Master, more than 100 experts, and over 1,000 at Adept rank. For a city, this was not unusual. It was only natural for such a settlement to have this many awakened individuals for its defense. That was the point of bringing Ray along, wasn't it? To be his meat shield. No, not meat shield, just a shield. Yeah. The moment that thought faded, Ash and Ray landed hard on the cavern floor, trying to soften the impact. Even with the effort, the ground beneath their feet cracked, sending up a burst of dust and scattering loose stones. It took him only a heartbeat to realize the worst part of their landing. They had fallen directly into the middle of enemy lines. The dwarves were already around them in a circle. Though only the nearer ones were looking at them, rest were standing blankly facing forward. And that was when he realized it. The faint unease he had felt when entering the city earlier was nothing compared to this. The air here was thick, heavy enough to feel like it was sinking into his lungs. A cold, crawling weight pressed against his senses, urging him to stop, to turn back, to leave this place and never return. Same was true for Ray as well. What a hideous creature this is, Ray thought, his gaze fixed on the Hollow Mother's grotesque form. The thing's pulsating mass of flesh, covered in unblinking eyes, seemed almost alive in a way that made his skin crawl. Even the air felt foul here, as if the creature's very presence had rotted the ground it stood on. He cursed under his breath, the taste of bile rising as he realized exactly where they had landed. But more than the revulsion, what burned hotter inside him was anger. This was the abomination responsible for the mind control and killing of so many dwarves on the surface. That creature is not from this world. Etheris's voice cut through his thoughts, carrying a cold certainty that made Ray pause. What do you mean not from this world? Demons obviously are not from this world. Exactly as I said. I do not recall its origin, but I can tell it is not from here. Its essence feels wrong, not in the way demons feel wrong, but in a deeper, older sense. Its energy is fundamentally different from theirs. You might not be able to sense it, but I can feel it clearly. I have faced beings of its kind before, although the ones I encountered were far stronger than this one. I have never faced this exact creature, but the nature of its existence is familiar. Keep in mind the information Ash gave you. Yeah, but my mana is getting drained even faster now. Life breath is sucking me dry. The moment he said that, he felt it, countless gazes pressing against his skin like invisible spears. He looked up and froze. Every single eye on the Hollow Mother stopped spinning and locked directly onto them. The same was true for all the people standing around it. More than 1,000 bodies turned towards them in eerie unison, their lifeless faces aimed straight at Ray and Ash. Yet, The weight of their combined stares felt like millions. The sheer pressure was crushing, as if the air had grown heavier with each passing second. Here you go. You can use them to restore your energy, and if the chance comes, attack the Hollow Mother, or whatever it is, with my Soul Sever ability. Cut away at its life bit by bit. The ability has grown even stronger than when you first acquired it, so it will help. Before Ray could reply, Ash's voice came from beside him. Hey, Ray. I think you should go ahead and create some chaos here. Stop them from getting close to me, because I am about to start tearing that disgusting flesh blob apart. Ray narrowed his eyes and gave Ash an annoyed look, but Ash didn't seem to care. Without waiting for a reply, Ash vanished, leaving behind only the word, "Let go." In the very next heartbeat, glowing orbs of crackling lightning appeared all around the dwarven ranks and near the gnarled, root-like tendrils of the Hollow Mother. A second later, they detonated in unison. This bastard! Ray cursed, but there was no time to complain. He ignored the chaotic storm of lightning and launched himself straight toward the awakened dwarves. The underground chamber was swallowed in blinding light. Boom! 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 The thunderous blasts tore through the darkness, peeling it away like old skin. When the light faded, Ray was still in midair from his leap, but what he saw below made his stomach tighten. 10 figures stood exactly where he was about to land, each wielding a weapon. They were all master-rank dwarves he had spotted only seconds earlier, yet somehow they were already here. What the hell? Did they endure that attack? And how did they move so fast? He looked toward the Hollow Mother, its grotesque mass pulsing faintly in the dim cave light, and there he saw Ash appear just above it. The sight was far from reassuring. Ash's situation was far from favorable. He appeared in midair, only to be surrounded by a legendary and 5 grandmasters, all locked on him like predators circling prey. I need to go there. Ray knew he didn't actually need to intervene. If Ash truly wanted to escape, he could simply teleport away without breaking a sweat. But this wasn't about survival. It was about the task they had agreed upon. Ray's role was to hold the dwarves back, to keep them distracted long enough for Ash to act. He didn't have to defeat every opponent, but he could at least stop the dangerous ones from interfering. That was the deal, and Ray intended to keep it. He dropped from his vantage point like a meteor, his eyes locked on the 10 master-ranked dwarves below. Some were encased entirely in aura, their armor gleaming faintly in the sparse light. Others stood within the heart of intricate, glowing magic circles, spells coiling at their fingertips, waiting for him to come within range. Ray didn't flinch. He didn't even bother to defend. The moment his boots touched the stone floor, a barrage of attacks descended from every direction. Blades wreathed in flame, spears of ice, bolts of condensed lightning. The ground trembled. BAAM! The impact thundered through the cavern. Dust erupted into the air, swallowing Ray's silhouette. But before the smoke could settle, he burst forward, Etheris gripped tight in his hands. He moved with lethal precision, his blade dancing in an unpredictable, ever-shifting rhythm that blurred the lines between technique and instinct. Each swing carried enough force to rattle bones, enhanced by the raw power of his mantle's energy discharge. He was using his aura roughly, not sharply. He did not want to cut them, but to injure them. The closest warriors were flung backward as if struck by a runaway boulder, crashing into their allies with grunts of pain. The magicians fared no better. Their shields, hastily conjured, shone brilliantly for a split second before Ray's attack slammed into them with a screech like tearing metal. One after another, the barriers fractured and collapsed, forcing their wielders to retreat before they could mount another spell. Ray ignored them. He had no time to waste. With his legs shrouded in white aura of light element, he kicked off the ground, leaving only a deafening sonic boom and a spray of shattered stone in his wake. The air warped from his sheer speed as he chained a flicker step, blinking past the chaos in a heartbeat. His focus locked solely on reaching Ash's position. Ash appeared just above the hideous form of the Hollow Mother, only to find himself already surrounded by 5 grandmasters and 1 legendary rank dwarf. Their presence was suffocating, each aura pressing against him like invisible walls. From among them, Ash recognized a few. One was the dwarf captain he had met upon his very first arrival in this city, the one whose sharp gaze had measured him without a word. Another was a grandmaster he had only glimpsed from afar. But Ash did not hesitate. His body moved before thought could catch up. In a flash, he teleported away, and since this was his second teleport, there was no delay in his skill. In the next instant, he reappeared at an even greater height, almost brushing the cavern's ceiling where the branching pathways ran along the stone like ancient veins carved into the rock. A faint violet light flared across his body for a single heartbeat as he bent his legs like a tightly wound spring, planting both feet firmly against the rough stone above. He was using the 6th form of his martial arts, a technique designed to magnify the weight and force behind an attack until even the smallest strike could crush like a falling boulder. That alone was not enough for what he intended. He poured mana into his armor, awakening its built-in weight-enhancing ability. The magic was heavy, almost dragging against his movements, and it was his first time calling on it. Even so, the pressure gathering around his body promised devastation. Lightning reflex, lightning step, verdict ion. With everything layered together, Ash pushed off the ceiling and hurled himself toward the Hollow Mother. The spells triggered instantly, yet no runic symbols appeared. His rune of concealment hid them from sight. 200 replicas of Eclipse, forged entirely from life mana, appeared around him. His body blurred into a streak of light, diving toward the Hollow Mother from above with the 200 life mana swords trailing close behind in perfect formation. From far away, the scene would have been strangely beautiful. 2 radiant streaks of light tore through the endless darkness toward the colossal figure at the center, which was still being illuminated by the countless lightning motes unleashed earlier from Ash's skill. One streak descended from the heavens, the other surged horizontally on the ground. But before he could close the distance, a legendary rank dwarf stepped into his path, his hammer glowing with a molten gold light. The sheer density of his power made the air shiver. The grandmasters followed close behind, most of them close combat specialists with heavy weapons, except for one who wielded magic. They attacked as one, unleashing their most powerful techniques. Hammer-shaped auras, crushing strikes, and bursts of raw force filling the air. Ash saw the wall of destruction rushing toward him, yet he neither stopped nor attempted to teleport away. Before making this move, he had already calculated the timing. Ray was approaching from below, and according to his precise judgment, Ray would intercept first. And that judgment, refined by omni-thought, proved flawless. In the very next second, Ray took the entire volley head-on. The attacks got absorbed into his skill, and his body flared with an even brighter white radiance. Then, in a burst of movement, he teleported out of Ash's path and swung his sword at the dwarves. Yet they did not flinch. Not a single one tried to evade. It was as if they had already resolved to die to shield the Hollow Mother. Ray cursed inwardly. Goddamn it, it's a relief that I made my aura rough rather than sharp, because they were in mid-air, with little room to maneuver. The brownish sheen of his attack slammed into them. Bodies were flung aside like scattered debris. Some tried to block with their weapons, others shifted their stance, but without space affinity, most could not escape in time. In fact, they could, but did not, because they wanted to stop Ash. But their efforts were waste because, in the next second, Ash passed through them. Their bodies were so close that it seemed they might collide. Yet in the end, their paths never truly crossed. However, his vibrant life sword struck all of them, sending the dwarves flinging back toward the ground. Though they managed to block the initial swords and shifted their positions mid-air to lessen the impact of the following blades, the force was relentless. The legendary dwarves could fly, and the grandmasters could step on air, allowing them some freedom of movement, so they fought hard to prevent the vibrant life swords from reaching the Hollow Mother. But Ash paid no mind to their defense. As soon as he slipped past them, the eclipse grew in his hands, its surface shimmering with thick life mana. Not only that, He infused the blade with space elemental energy, causing his arms to bulge and strain under the weight of the combined mana. Still, he held firm. He was not worried about damaging his arms. Last time he had done something similar with lightning and life mana, it had resulted in a burst of white lightning that nearly exhausted his body before getting healed by Rune of Life. But this time felt somehow easier, perhaps because he practiced the technique every day, even if at lower intensities. The fusion of life and space mana formed a swirling, light violet mist around the eclipse, making it look almost ethereal. In the next instant, he was about to strike the Hollow Mother with the sword when her vein-like limbs of the monster lashed out at him from all directions. Puffs of black smoke, nothing but hollow-born creatures, erupted, clouding his vision. But all their attacks were futile against him. His pure mana, enhanced by the primordial core, combined with the increased weight from his armor and martial arts form, along with elemental boosts and his own mana augmentation, made him an unstoppable force. He sliced through the tentacle-like vines with ease, cutting a path deep into the inner sanctum of the Hollow Mother. As soon as he passed through the gash he created, a deafening blast echoed through the cavern. The explosion shook the ground violently, as if an earthquake had erupted beneath them. The blast's sheer force was due to Ash's enormous weight crashing into the creature, yet the outer surface remained mostly intact. It was the inner parts that were devastated. Fluids and bile, along with brain matter, erupted like a volcanic eruption from the hole he made. Then came a horrifying screech that seemed to claw at Ray's very soul. Though soundless, the scream was the most terrifying thing he had ever experienced, as if he were feeling the creature's pain firsthand. It was a sensation that left no room for comfort or hope. Unable to bear it, Ray vomited, the sight of the fluids too disgusting to endure. But seeing Master Rank's dwarfs coming towards him along with experts, and the Grandmasters and legendary dwarfs moving toward the Hollow Mother, towards Ash, he pushed himself to his feet. No. Ray flickered and intercepted their advance. Although they had destroyed all of Ash's life swords, the dwarves were not without wounds. Their short bodies restricted their movements, giving Ash's attack space to cut deep. They bore many cuts, bruises, and even burns on their skin. Overall, Ash's assault had been effective against them. Even though they were not demons, they had hollow-born creatures fused inside them, which made them vulnerable to the life mana's effects. Intercepting the dwarves, Ray swung Etheris and unleashed his sword art. On the other side, the monster's entire form trembled violently. Its vines and tentacles thrashed wildly, slamming down onto the ground and crushing some nearby dwarves into a bloody paste. Others were drawn inside the creature's massive body, desperate to reach Ash and pull him out of the hole he had made. The Hollow Mother's screams continued, a brutal cacophony that made everything harder for Ray. It was as if someone was blasting a loudspeaker right beside his head at full volume, even though he tried to block out the noise around his ears using his aura. Still, the sound managed to reach him, though with reduced intensity. But it's distracting, Ray thought as he ducked under a strike and kicked a dwarf away, swinging his sword with precise strikes. When the power behind an attack was weaker, he used his mantle skill to increase the power and sometimes took attack head-on to absorb some of the force behind them, allowing him to hold them back. But as he was holding them back in the very next moment, before the expert ranks could even reach Ray, his attacks froze, and screech! A real, piercing sound cut through the chaos with almost the same intensity as before. Previously, the Hollow Mother's scream had been soundless, but this time, the sound was unmistakably there. Ray looked around, his face tightening with grim determination as blood started trickling from his ears. Damn it! Why is this happening? What am I supposed to do now? The reason Ash had decided to enter inside the Hollow Mother was because of the information provided by the Whisperer. According to him, the Hollow Mother, as powerful as it was known to be, possessed a terrifying ability to control the minds of others, twisting their will until they became nothing but obedient puppets. It only needed time for that influence to take root. However, in exchange for such an overwhelming ability, it sacrificed its mobility entirely. It could not move from its spot, remaining anchored like a monstrous, living growth. For protection, it relied on the people it controlled or its enormous tentacles that acted like limbs, lashing out at anything that came close. Other than that, its natural defenses were formidable, and its ability to heal was exceptionally fast. This was why killing it from the outside was considered nearly impossible. The real problem was not simply that it could heal, but that it fueled its regeneration by consuming the life force of the puppets under its control, draining them dry to restore itself. Because of this, Ash had decided it would be far better to attack from the inside. If he could land a single strike with enough power, the Hollow Mother should die instantly, before it could even react. From the energy ray Ash had sensed earlier, its strength was on par with an archdemon, a being ranked as a grandmaster by human standards. Yet this only made Ash wonder what kind of Hollow Mother the Whisperer had faced in the past, since the one before them now was far smaller than what the old man had described. Before Ash returned here, the Whisperer had contacted the Saints in the central city of the Dwarf continent, but neither of them had found any sign of mind control. Still, if the Saints were truly under such influence, they would not have shown symptoms unless the truth was witnessed with one's own eyes. That was why Ash came back. If the Hollow Mother was here, it would mean only this city was under control. He had already seen people here moving like puppets with empty eyes, so this was the first place he needed to confirm. And he was able to confirm the presence of Hollow Mother, thus making the other places safe. For now. But after stepping inside the creature's body, Ash quickly realized things were not unfolding as he had hoped. He had managed to wreak havoc inside, his body and sword moving in perfect rhythm, slashing again and again, yet it felt like striking against something that refused to yield. Damn it, what a rubbery surface. The inner flesh of the monster was so unnaturally elastic that Eclipse barely left a scratch unless he channeled its space cut ability. Even then, the cuts were healed too quickly to cause lasting damage. And though he had caused chaos in its insides, the sheer size of the creature meant his attacks were almost meaningless. To make matters worse, veins and fleshy tendrils, seemingly grown from the creature's own living tissue, began snaking toward him, wrapping around his arms and legs in an attempt to bind him. He tore through them again and again, but their strength was nothing to scoff at. Every time he broke free, it cost him mana to reinforce his body with raw physical power, his reserves burning away faster than he liked. And then came the Hollowborns. They forced their way into his body in an endless stream, each one trying to burrow deeper, only to be pulverized instantly. Even without using elemental sight, the sheer number of them flooding in was impossible to ignore. It was like being submerged in a living current. Back when he first entered the city, their presence had been subtle enough to escape his notice. Now they were everywhere. But Ash was not someone to be taken lightly. Life Bloom. Life Bloom. He unleashed the same blooming technique as before, this time with life mana bursting outward like a sudden spring after winter. It worked much like the lightning variant, but instead of raw destruction, it scattered surges of vitality through the surrounding flesh, forcefully tearing away the unnatural corruption that clung to him. The twin waves of power spread violently, carving open a momentary space of freedom inside the suffocating mass. A soundless scream echoed in his mind, an eerie and bone-deep sensation that could not be heard by ears yet clawed at the very essence of existence. It was a horrifying experience, the kind that went beyond fear and pain, and he felt his soul shudder as if some unseen hand had stirred its depths. Soul attack? He gritted his teeth, forcing himself to endure it with every bit of willpower he possessed, his mind screaming for focus. He continued to weave life mana into his sword, slashing here and there with precision born from desperation. The wounds caused by space element attacks began to heal on the creature, but those inflicted by life element strikes lingered stubbornly. Even so, the unrelenting pressure gnawed at him, and he could feel his thoughts beginning to slow, the edges of his mind growing dull despite having Omni-Thought activated. He cursed under his breath, yet he did not allow his movements to falter. Lightning orbs detonated one after another, bursts of life energy flared like miniature suns, and every spell blended into a chaotic storm that consumed the chamber. The onslaught drained more than half of the mana from one of his cores, but he pushed on without hesitation. The fusion of life mana and his life drain ability worked in surprising harmony, enhancing his sword power. However, where Ray's sword was beautiful, elegant, and refined to the point of perfection, flawless as if every strike were born from centuries of mastery, Ash's blade still carried the marks of inexperience. It was crude in some parts, with many rough edges, a style that felt as though he was imitating something he had seen before and patching it together with pieces of his own ideas. That lack of balance shattered the equilibrium of his technique. Because of it, his sword strikes, though often landing true, would occasionally miss their mark, forcing him to rely on his magic to fill the gaps. Lightning blasts and life-imbued projectiles covered every opening, but the entire performance was messy, a patchwork of improvisation rather than the seamless elegance of a master. And even after all of that, he was nowhere near close to killing the abomination. Do I have to use it? Ash grimaced, his mind racing through every option. He was already throwing in everything he had, from martial arts to his eclipse ability, magic, and sword art. And yet, looking at the monstrous figure before him, it felt as though only by unleashing that could he truly alter the course of events. The Whisperer had not let him enter this battle unprepared. Even if the man could not personally intervene, and even though the other saints were unable to help because of the overwhelming surge of dungeon outbreaks and the need to guard key locations, nothing had stopped them from entrusting their stored abilities to him. After all, no high-ranking person dared to face the Hollow Mother at full strength, fearing that a moment of weakness could lead to mind control. As for the one far more powerful than the monster could just kill it instantly. But what if a peak-level attack could be entrusted to someone immune to such control? I am going to use it and then run. The truth was simple. There was no known weakness of the Hollow Mother except the powers of life and death mana. Ash's role was to find that weakness. He wanted to discover it with his own hands, to deal the final blow himself, but it was becoming painfully clear that even with the creature standing still, it was far beyond what he could kill. Should I ask Ray to come? The thought flickered in his mind before he dismissed it. No, the Hollowborns are too many here. Only because of various effects from my runes am I safe right now. If Ray came in here, his life breath skill would drain his mana at an enormous rate. I doubt he could last even 5 seconds. Runes themselves did not consume mana, which made it a mystery where the energy to power them came from. Did the runes tap into some infinite source? Or did they draw from something unknown and far older? That was a question for another time. Right now, he wanted to preserve the item the Whisperer had entrusted to him, to save it for some other critical moment, or to hold on to it unless he faced a true life-and-death situation. He could, of course, request another from him, but storing the attack of a saint was a task that demanded mana, time, and immense patience. What the Whisperer had given him was something prepared after arriving at the academy, during the brief lull when the constant casualties had lessened. And in all that time, only one such item had been completed. Don't be greedy, Ash. I can just request another. Maybe. Many might not know it, but Ash despised asking for anything from others. His heart would roar at him to do everything himself, to prove that there was no need to depend on anyone. His mindset had been shaped in a twisted way, born from the absence of any parental care, with only Alicia's support keeping him from collapsing entirely. It had molded him into someone fiercely independent, unwilling to lean on anyone else. That was why he insisted on handling everything on his own. But now he was at least beginning to try to take small steps toward asking for help when it truly mattered. Life Bloom. A storm of life mana surged outward, sweeping through the area and granting a brief moment of respite. In that fragile pause, Ash reached into his soul vault and summoned something that shimmered faintly, almost as if it carried the weight of worlds. Floating above his palm, glowing in a strange blend of colors, was a golden-green drop of blood threaded with a crimson hue that seemed to pulse faintly like a beating heart. This was no ordinary blood. It was the combined power of Saint Myra and Saint Lydia fused through blood, who held the affinities of light and nature respectively. Indeed, this single drop of blood was a strategic asset still being prepared by the Whisperer as part of a plan to counter a future war with the demons. Whisperer, ever the meticulous planner, had already begun preparing such things long before the threat had truly taken place. Yet one question inevitably rose from its existence. How could the blood of two saints, each carrying their own will, intent, and power, fuse together in such perfect harmony? And why did its color carry that strange golden-green glow threaded with crimson instead of the expected mix of their individual hues? The answer was deceptively simple. The strange coloration came from the sheer concentration of power, the intertwining of two distinct affinities, and the depth of will imbued into it. As for its fusion, that was the result of Whisperer's unknown sorcery tied to fate itself. He had linked them together, binding the two drops just as fate binds one soul to another, an act that blurred the boundary between miracle and manipulation. The moment the drop of blood settled into Ash's hand, the Hollow Mother froze. It halted every movement as if some primal instinct warned it of the danger, its grotesque body shuddering in place. Even through the agony raging inside it from the destruction of its inner flesh, it became utterly still. But that hesitation lasted only for a single heartbeat. Because in the very next moment, Ash ignited the blood, its glow flaring into a blinding brilliance, and he was just about to teleport that something seized him. Looking down, his eyes narrowed as he saw a thin, sinewy vein snaking up from the ground, wrapping tightly around his toes. It had waited for the perfect moment, striking when his body was still and unguarded for those few seconds, coiling around him like a predator catching its prey. Shit! There was no deafening explosion, yet light engulfed everything, drowning the insides of the monster in a blinding brilliance of green and gold. The radiance surged outward, burning through all that it touched, leaving not even Ash spared from the wrath of the saints' combined might. It was his first time experiencing the full force of such an attack. The will embedded within it was so absolute that it felt as though the very laws of this place were being rewritten around him. Until now, he had been fortunate. No saint had ever attacked him with true intent. If they had, they could have ended him by simply sealing him within a domain. Of course, Ash would not die here, but survival was not the only question. What about the pain he would endure? The memory of the agony? The experience of being on the receiving end of a saint's wrath? And what about the fury that still burned within him toward the Hollow Mother? All of that was cast into uncertainty, swallowed by the unrelenting blaze. The holy light pulverized everything in its path, reducing the creature's inner flesh to nothing but ash. And then, a scream erupted. A true, piercing wail unlike the soundless psychic cries it had used before. A monstrous, skin-crawling sound tore through the chaos, slicing the air with almost the same overwhelming force as the light itself. The Hollow Mother's voice had taken on a nightmarish quality, its resonance so unnatural that it seemed to bypass the ear and burrow straight into the mind. Ray's head jerked up, his expression hardening as blood began to seep from his ears. All around him, the dwarves halted in their tracks. Whatever they had been doing was abandoned in that instant as their eyes turned skyward. Then, one by one, they began to scream, a terrible, unending chorus, until the sound of human voices merged with the Hollow Mother's inhuman howl. It was a sound too grotesque to be produced by any mortal throat, an unholy harmony of despair and rage that made the very air shudder as if the world itself wanted to recoil. Damn it! Why is this happening? What am I supposed to do now? Ray cursed inwardly, the weight of indecision pressing against his chest. For once, even he did not know the next move to make. So he did what instinct told him was best. Without another thought, he surged forward, dashing toward the Hollow Mother with the intent to end it before things spiraled further. If I kill it, everything will be over. But when Ray reached halfway, the creature's countless eyes began to glow, thin streams of golden and green light seeping from beneath the lids. At first it was faint, like the first flicker of dawn, but within seconds it began to swell, spilling out in greater brilliance. Ray stopped abruptly, a chill racing down his spine. It is the will of the saint. Witness it, It is not every day you will see the power of a saint. All this time you treated their authority lightly, simply because they were kind towards you. See this and be warned. Though, I must admit, I am quite curious who entrusted that boy with something like this. Hearing Etheris' words, Ray's expression shifted to one of pure awe. Even though his eardrums had ruptured from the earlier sound, the ringing void in his hearing dulled the chaos around him. His healing skill was slowly mending the damage, but for now all his attention was locked on the spectacle before him. Despite the tangled storm of emotions he carried toward Ash, anger, disgust, bitterness, and a dozen others, those feelings faded in the face of what he was witnessing. The world itself seemed to bend, its rules warping under the weight of that light. His breath caught in his throat, and an unbidden thought rose within him. The creature would not survive this. Within seconds, the radiance spilled outward in a great surge, covering every inch of the Hollow Mother's grotesque form. It struck with such purity and force that even the dwarves standing nearby were reduced to drifting ash at the slightest touch. That was the moment Ray's days shattered. He launched himself into motion witnessing that, his body blurring as he kicked aside as many dwarves as he could, clearing them from the path of the saint's annihilation will. His movements were desperate yet precise. Each kick meant to send them tumbling out of harm's reach. He sprinted through the chaos, from one cluster of dwarves to another, pulling them away, shoving them clear. Even Etheris was sent flying into motion, the sword spinning through the air like a silver flash, striking with the flat of its blade to drive others out of danger. Yet even with both their efforts, too many were caught in the light. The death toll was impossible to count at the moment, but Ray knew. More than 50 had been lost. His jaw tightened, a grim shadow passing over his face. But there was no time to grieve. The light was already receding, fading like the last echo of a storm, and at that moment his ears healed fully. The ringing faded, and silence rushed in. He realized the screaming had stopped. The dwarves now stood frozen in place, their bodies locked mid-motion, as if someone had paused time itself. Their heads remained tilted toward the sky, their faces contorted in the echoes of their last scream. A thick haze of dust and burnt air hung over the place where the Hollow Mother had stood. Without a second's hesitation, Ray tightened his grip on Etheris and sprinted toward it, every sense straining for whatever would come next. Where is Ash? He should have run away before that attack hit, right? Even though he asked himself this, the thought did not bring him any real reassurance. Deep down, he did not fully believe it. He had not seen Ash coming out from inside of Hollow Mother, and there were no traces of him anywhere in the surroundings. What if Ash died? Ray did not know what to feel if that was true. Should he be happy that his love rival, the one who had stolen his lucky chances and shifted his fate into a completely different path, had perished? Or should he feel sad that Ash might have died while trying to save so many lives? Or perhaps he should feel anger that Ash had died without fulfilling their deal, leaving Ray without the answers he desperately wanted? The feelings inside him tangled together into something too complicated to name. Yet if he had to choose, Ray wanted Ash alive. Be alive. Answer my question, and then, I will kill you someday. Yeah. The dust began to settle, and the place where the Hollow Mother had stood now revealed nothing but a massive crater. Standing at its edge, Ray found no sign of Ash, and the Hollow Mother was gone as well. It's dead, Ray muttered quietly. There was not even a single fragment of the monster's body left. It was as though it had been erased from existence itself, leaving no trace in this world. That was the might of a saint. That was the overwhelming power a saint was capable of. But even then, this type of attack took time to prepare. If a saint had fought the Hollow Mother, there would be no chance for this type of attack power. Ray felt awe at the sight, but far stronger than that, he felt anger. That he died. His emotions were a mess, clashing violently inside him, and before he could even release that storm, a rock in the center of the crater shifted aside, catching Ray's attention. From beneath it emerged a pale boy with long white hair, his body without a single scar, skin smooth and untouched as though sculpted by careful hands. The only imperfection was the deep scowl etched into his expression, a look that made it clear he was far from pleased. It was Ash. Seeing him, Ray let out a breath he had not realized he was holding, a quiet sigh of relief escaping him. At least I will get my answers. Yes, Ray was selfish when it came to the people he cared about, but it was not out of pure concern for Ash. He wanted Ash alive because he still needed answers related to his family from him. Nothing more. Just then, a dull thud echoed from somewhere nearby, then another and another, the sound continuing without pause. Ray turned and saw the hollow-controlled people collapsing to the ground one after another, their bodies finally free from the monster's control. The air beside him shimmered like a disturbed reflection in water, and Ash appeared without a sound. "Why are you looking like that? Did you get caught in the attack?" Ray asked, his eyes narrowing slightly in suspicion. The scowl on Ash's face deepened further. His mood was foul. On one side, he had been forced to endure the attack of two combined Saint. Feeling every ounce of its pain tear into him, he had died only to be revived again. If not for the Soul Library, he might have lost his mind entirely. Even though the memory of that pain was now stored within the library, his body still remembered it all, the sensation lingering in his bones and across his skin, making him shudder involuntarily. There are some experiences the mind can forget, but the body never lets go of them. That was what was happening to Ash. And it was not only the pain. His armor, the Phantom Veil, had been utterly destroyed. Not even a single fragment remained, leaving him unable to regenerate it. It was a good utility item. Damn it, it's gone. Ash tried to bury his focus in that thought, using it as a distraction from the phantom sensations that still clung to his body like a shadow he could not shake off. Heal the injured here. We don't have time. Acting like some aloof, edgy lord, Ash turned his back on Ray without hesitation and walked toward the dwarves lying unconscious on the cold, cracked ground. The faint tremor of his boots against the stone echoed through the air, as if even his footsteps carried an air of command. Ray exhaled slowly, the faintest sigh slipping past his lips, though his face remained cold and expressionless. Without a word, he started walking as well, but in the opposite direction from Ash, not wanting to follow him. Yet, before either of them could take more than exactly 10 steps, something stirred within their minds. A sudden, intrusive thought that jolted them into sharp awareness. The thoughts came at the same instant, but the questions were not the same. Why is life breath still consuming mana? Why am I still feeling this unease? Their eyes widened in unison, a sudden urgency flashing within them as they instantly expanded their senses. Ash reaching out through omni-thought and elemental sight, Ray spreading the reach of his sharp, master-level perception. The Hollowborns, they were still there, still alive, not destroyed, not even moving, merely frozen in place. Yet even as Ash looked at them now, none made the slightest attempt to attack. It was wrong, felt wrong. Both of them pushed their senses further, stretching them as wide as they could. And then, something caught their attention. It was a worm about the size of a human palm. Its skin pitch black, its mouth jagged with uneven, saw-like teeth, and a single glaring eye in the center of its head. That eye was unmistakable. It looked exactly like the one belonging to the Hollow Mother. Damn, this thing is still alive. They didn't waste a heartbeat. In perfect synchronicity, both teleported to its location, their movements sharp and precise. Their swords lit up instantly, one wreathed in aura, the other in mana, both aiming to cut down the black worm in a single strike. This bastard, this shit, Ash and Ray cursed in their minds, their irritation not aimed at the worm, but at each other for arriving at the same time and attacking the same target. Yet neither slowed down. But just as their blades were about to cleave the creature apart, the worm turned its lone, eerie eye toward them and, did it just smile? An icy wave of dread surged through them. Their instincts screamed to stop, to pull back immediately, but it was already too late. Their swords sliced through, and dark, viscous black blood splattered across the rocks. Silence. A silence so deep it pressed against their ears, their senses spread wide, waiting for the inevitable counterattack. Muscles tense, heartbeats steady but sharp, ready. But nothing happened. Was it? Boom. The explosion ripped through the land with the raw, blinding force of a nuclear strike. The shockwave roared outward, tearing through mountains, shattering stone, and erasing the Iron Hall City from the face of the continent as if it had never existed. The Iron Hall City became the Iron Tomb City. What was that? Ray's head was ringing, an endless, high-pitched buzzing that seemed to drill into his skull without pause. His thoughts scattered in all directions, blurred and unsteady, as if each one slipped through his grasp before he could hold on to it. He tried to open his eyes, to move his hands, to hear something, anything, but nothing happened. There was no sound, no light, no response from his body. Etheris's voice echoed inside his mind, broken and fragmented like a signal struggling through heavy interference, the syllables bending and twisting until even the meaning was half lost. Yet even those disjointed words could not drown out the constant buzzing that rattled through his consciousness. His skull throbbed with every heartbeat, each pulse sending sharp tremors through his head. His body felt hot. No, not just hot, burning, far beyond what any human should be able to endure. What is happening? His mind searched for answers, but his memories were fogged. He couldn't recall what had happened, as though a thick curtain had been drawn across his thoughts. Minutes passed, or perhaps it was half an hour. Time no longer held any meaning. It was only after what felt like an eternity that the buzzing began to fade, just enough for him to think again, though his senses still refused to return. He could neither see nor hear, and his lips would not part to form a sound. I remember, there was a sudden blast and, "Wake up, Ray! Don't die, you bastard!" Etheris's desperate cry tore through the haze, making Ray's thoughts flinch as if struck. "I am awake, though." Whack! The words cut off abruptly, but in that instant Ray felt something deeper than the broken syllables. Shock, grief, anger, and a raw sadness that shouldn't even exist within a sword. Those emotions seeped into him through their bond, unfiltered and heavy. "Oh, you are awake. I guess you survived then. Good. Good. It's good you're still alive." The voice had shifted instantly, the earlier desperate shouts now replaced by a calm, almost grandfatherly tone. If Ray had been in a better mood, he might have found the sword's unpredictable behavior, going from raging to gentle in seconds, oddly amusing. After all, this was the so-called Godslayer speaking. But he wasn't in the mood for amusement. What happened? I remember, a sudden, massive explosion erupting from nowhere. I reacted without thinking, releasing all the absorbed force outward, enough to stall the blast, or at least that's what should have happened. But then I remember, my body burning, the mantle skill's limit shattering even though the charge had already dropped to 0%. How is that possible? How could that attack have happened? Deep inside, he already knew. The Hollow Mother had survived even after the Saint's strike that Ash unleashed. It had transformed into its small form, a form that had a 100% chance that it could quickly regrow to its previous size. Still, he could not bring himself to fully accept it. How could such a tiny remnant of that creature create an explosion of that magnitude? And what about the awakened ones who were unconscious? What about the civilians? Why can't I see or hear anything? Why can't I even open my mouth? What's happening? And where are you? Were you thrown away from the blast? And Ash? Where is he? His questions came one after another, a flood that refused to stop, though he already knew the answers to most of them. His eyes would not open because they had melted away in the heat. His ears could not hear because the drums had been torn apart. His mouth could not speak because there was no mouth left to move. He knew what that meant for the others in the blast zone, but some fragile, desperate hope still clung to him. That perhaps, somehow, a miracle had saved them. Perhaps the Saint who had given Ash that attack had come to shield them. But all that came from Etheris was a single, drawn-out sigh. Being linked to Ray's mind, Etheris had felt every contradiction in his thoughts, every hope and denial tangled together. Even when Ray's mind had been in chaos earlier, Etheris had sensed it. And now that sigh, that heavy, resigned sigh, told Ray everything he feared was true. His thoughts stilled, his body stilled, even his emotions froze in place, as if the weight of the truth had locked them away. Did they all die? I tried to save them, but in the end they all died. Was it my fault? Did I kill them? No, I tried my best. I fought with everything I had. We almost succeeded, but what happened at the end? Why did such a massive blast occur? Before his thoughts could fall deeper into the abyss, a new sensation stirred. Someone was touching him. It was so unexpected that his mind flinched away from it. Who? Ray asked himself, but then his body suddenly felt lighter, as if an invisible weight had been lifted from him. A strange warmth spread through his veins, mending what had been torn apart. He felt his shattered hands knit back together, and the broken parts of him, the torn flesh, the deep burns, the cracks in bone, slowly began to restore themselves. His eyes, ears, and mouth formed once more, reshaping with a sensation that was alien to him. Within a few minutes of this constant, almost overwhelming supply of energy, Ray could feel his body returning to its former state. The feeling was bizarre, almost foreign, as if his very cells were being rewritten. It was his first time suffering such devastating injuries, the kind that left even breathing a distant thought. If not for his indomitable mental skill, Ray would have been nothing more than a corpse lying in the dirt. His eyelids fluttered open, and the first thing he saw was a face, beautiful in its symmetry, framed by long, loose hair that swayed gently with the lingering breeze. Blue eyes stared back at him, and in them he recognized Ash. Yet the expression was not the one he had grown used to in the present. It mirrored the way Ash had looked long ago. Eyes dim, stripped of light, a completely neutral mask that seemed to bury every possible trace of human emotion. Ray said nothing. His mind felt heavy, as if the thoughts he wanted to form were too dense to rise to the surface. Pushing himself off the ground, he became aware of sunlight spilling over his bare skin. Sunlight? Slowly he turned his head. In that instant, his heart felt as though it had been torn apart. His blood ran cold, his spine stiffened, and every breath felt like frost in his lungs. His eyes widened as the sight before him crashed into his mind. There was no sign of peaks, ridges, or even debris, only a vast, yawning hole carved into the very planet itself, and they were lying inside its depths, like two fragile survivors at the bottom of a scar the world itself would remember. This. The stutter was all he could manage. No other words came, but within that broken sound was the weight of what he felt, the cruelty of the world, the cruelty of fate, and a deep, unrestrained hatred for the demons that had brought this to pass. Ash watched Ray's stuttering figure, so unlike the brave protagonist he had once read about in the novel. What bravery! There was no such thing. People simply put on a show, hiding their cracks behind practiced smiles. Everyone is vulnerable in some way or another. Some feel it in the presence of those they love. Others, who have no one, feel it most when the silence of being alone swallows them. In that silence, they find a strange solace, yet also the sharpest reminder of how fragile they are. Ash himself was no exception. He could not shake the sensation that still clung to him, the feeling of his entire body being consumed by heat, only to be healed in the same instant. That unbearable heat, that tearing agony, and the unnatural speed of recovery had left a shadow in his mind that no amount of willpower could erase. The experience had been nothing short of traumatic. He was still reeling from having faced the full power of a saint's attack. And before that shock had even settled, he had endured yet another of his most horrifying deaths, one that had lodged itself quietly and mercilessly into his bones. The emotions, the pain, and the raw flood of sensation had been too much, forcing him back into the expressionless state he had once worn in the days before Dark Ash had vanished. It was the only shield he knew, a cold mechanism to protect what remained of himself. His sense of self clung together by threads, threads woven from the rune of stability, the rune of knowledge, and perhaps the faint whisper of life. So they all died. Ah! The thought was cold, but it was not born from apathy. It was born from a choice. He was not feeling anything because he refused to let himself feel. He had locked his emotions away, sealing the door shut. And yet, no matter how much he suppressed them, his heart still beat against that locked door, thumping loudly as if to remind him that he was still alive. I tried my best. I killed the Hollow Mother. Then why did the explosion happen? And an explosion of this size, one that erased the whole city from the face of the planet? Does that even make sense? He had fought like a beast trapped in a cage, shattering the bars with bloody hands, only to realize that the circus he had been trying to escape had already burned to ash. His fists clenched before he even noticed. And then, beside him, damn it, Ray broke down, his voice cracking under the unbearable weight of emotions. His guilt, his anger, his sadness, his grief, his... He collapsed to his knees and cried, fists pounding the ground as if trying to bury the pain beneath the earth. I should have been more careful. I should have seen it coming. His teeth sank into his lip until the metallic tang of blood spread across his tongue. What's the point of surviving if everyone's dead? Inside, his mind spun in an endless loop. I killed them. I killed them. I killed them. Even if Ray had never known the victims personally, his conscience refused to let him detach. People had died, and in his heart, he felt a thread of responsibility binding him to their fate. It was his carelessness. No, it's my fault. Why is he falling apart like this? Ash's gaze was void of emotion as he watched Ray, then shifted upward, toward the sky, then towards the vast crater, the aftermath of the battle. It was my fault. I wasn't able to kill it fast enough. If only I had mastery over the death element, the creature would have been finished in seconds. Maybe, the wind carried with it the dust of a million shattered dreams, clinging to their skin, seeping into their lungs, settling deep like the weight of guilt neither could shake. It took a long time for Ray's sobs to quiet. Ash did not comfort him, nor did he scold him, but his own thoughts circled endlessly, weaving together every possible grim outcome as if punishing himself in silence. When the air finally felt less suffocating, Ray spoke again, his voice rough and uneven. Why did the blast happen? I don't know, Ash replied instantly. Ray's face flushed red, his frustration igniting again. You don't know? You said you knew everything about that abomination, and now you're saying you don't know? Are you kidding me? His words were sharp, spilling with anger that refused to settle. Ash turned his head slightly, meeting Ray's gaze with an unyielding coldness. I am not omniscient. No one is. Ray gritted his teeth, bitterness twisting his voice. As if, you claim to know everything about me, yet you don't know anything about the monster. Only if you knew, only if you... And what then? What difference would that have made? We still would have been unable to kill that monster. People still would have died from the life force absorption. We tried and failed, that is all. That's all? That's all? You're saying that's all? Are you even human, you vile monster? Don't you have any feelings? Ray's rage erupted as he swung a punch at Ash. Ash caught it, but the force still rattled through his bones, making his fingers tingle. Before the quarrel could spiral into a full fight, Etheris' voice rang out. Yes, voice. His words came directly from his sword form, buried a short distance away. The sound wasn't carried by air but by faint, deliberate vibrations in the blade itself. Both Ash and Ray knew he could do this, so they weren't surprised, only reminded of his presence. Sigh, don't be so pathetic, fighting like this. Don't you have any shame? But don't you know what he said? That's it. The bastard didn't feel anything. Ray shot back, still seething. Oh. Ray, not everyone likes to show their vulnerable side to others. Leave him be. Instead, let me tell you exactly what happened. how the blast occurred, and everything else. Even Etheris did not know the full extent of the Hollow Mother's power, yet he understood how the explosion had happened, an explosion vast enough to carve a massive hole into the planet itself. After all, the way he perceived the world was nothing like how humans did. He was a sword after all. His senses saw things that humans could never see with naked eyes, and so he could feel it in a way no human ever would. The cause of the devastation lay in the Hollowborns. These were tiny, almost invisible worms, so small they could be mistaken for the mana molecules themselves, merging with the environment, creating an illusion. Inside each of Hollowborns rested a faint wisp of energy, so fragile it was barely noticeable, and yet they were the primary source of mind control. Those Hollowborns had self-destructed. Now, imagine what would happen if a single air molecule exploded. In reality, according to physics, such a thing is impossible, and even if it did somehow occur, the result would be so small it would remain invisible to the naked eye. A normal air molecule carries no energy of its own. But what if it did? What if there were millions or even trillions of Hollowborns, each holding just a trace of energy, and every single one of them exploded at the same moment? The result would be an explosion so immense that not even the hardest metal known to man could endure it. Everything within range would be vaporized, the air itself would vanish, the atmosphere would be stripped away, and the very space around it would begin to collapse under the strain. And that was exactly what had happened. The blast had left behind a gaping wound in the world, one that would take thousands of years to heal, and even then, the scar would remain for all time. The air still existed, but it was thin, scarce, and barely enough to sustain normal life. An awakened human could survive without air by relying entirely on mana, and that was how Ray had endured even in the absence of an atmosphere. As for Ash, he could still breathe, though only with great effort, thanks to the protection of the Rune of Space. After hearing everything, both Ash and Ray fell silent for a long time. Neither of them spoke, because they knew there was nothing that could have been done. No amount of power could have stopped such a catastrophe. Even if someone had been strong enough to unleash their domain and impose their will upon the world, controlling everything within that domain, even down to the smallest mana particle, the truth remained. A domain had its limits. Humans had their limits. No one could cover hundreds of thousands of square kilometers at once. Yes, a domain's range grew with its master's power, but even saints faced boundaries they could not cross. And so, their blame shifted to no one, and yet, somehow, it still fell upon themselves. I am weak, so pitifully weak. In my previous world, the world was full of nepotism, corruption, and a hidden monarchy. There, death came slowly, wrapped in harassment, humiliation, and torture. In that world, power was not salvation, it was poison. It broke the mind of a person long before it broke their body. It stripped them of all will to fight, leaving them utterly powerless. But here, even though there is power, even though there are real and actual gods, anything could kill millions of people in a single millisecond. Here, death feels fleeting, sudden, and somehow almost normal. But even though death was common here, and countless lives ended every day, it was the same for Earth too. The difference was that such things were rarely shown on the news, never spoken of openly. Those tragedies were quietly and swiftly buried, hidden under other headlines. People did not care unless the victim was someone they personally knew, and perhaps the news simply chose to show something else, something they deemed more important, more attention-worthy. Anyway, still, even in this cruel world, there would be moments when people were shaken, moments when they felt that deep sadness knowing millions had died. At least some would. Most would simply hear about it at face value, nod or sigh for a moment, and then forget the next second. They do not know how it feels when someone close to you dies. They do not know what despair is. They do not understand the weight of sadness. They do not know what it feels like to be left utterly alone. And now, there was no one to mourn the dwarves that had died here. Perhaps if there were those who had been their friends, they would mourn, and the dwarves in other cities would feel that grief. And that was what the new reality was. Ash knew this, and so, even though he had not been able to save them, he still wanted to do something. Anything. He did not want them to be forgotten, erased, and buried in silence like so many stories on Earth that were swallowed and lost beneath louder news. So he acted. Ash vanished, disappearing without a sound, teleporting to somewhere far from sight. After a few minutes, he returned. There was no change in him outwardly, except that Eclipse was now in his hands. Ray looked at him, confusion flickering faintly across his face. Ash stepped forward, his hands moving slightly, and in the next second a massive rock appeared in front of them and crashed to the ground with a heavy, echoing sound. The rock was not just any stone. It was a part of a mountain peak, a piece that Ash had cut cleanly and brought back here. It stood tall and imposing, at least 10 meters high. He then lifted Eclipse and began to carve into the rock, his movements slow and deliberate, each stroke leaving behind precise markings. Here lies nothing, but only a proof that millions of dreams, from big to small, from small to big, perished here, leaving nothing but a large crater as their only remains. Ash stepped back once he had finished writing those words, reading them quietly with his emotionless face. Then, as if remembering something, he raised his sword again and added another line. May their dreams be fulfilled in another life. Ash believed in another life. After all, wasn't he living his second one? Even though he did not know if there was someone who was responsible for his transmigration, but that was a question for another time. Turning away from the stone, Ash spoke calmly. I am returning back. He was dressed in nothing but simple clothes now. Twice today he had died, and his armor, which had been built for utility, was completely destroyed. What he wore now was nothing more than mundane clothing. Ray, too, had wore clothes at some point before lashing out at Ash earlier. Hearing Ash's words, Ray looked at him, but this time he did not blame him. Instead, he felt an emptiness spreading through his chest. He felt powerless, helpless, and unbearably hollow. It was the same suffocating feeling that had crushed him on the day he saw his parents slaughtered before his eyes. That same sense of being unable to do anything returned from the depths of his heart, clawing at him until his throat tightened. He opened his mouth, wanting to speak, but no words came out. Ray turned his gaze to the rock again, reading the words Ash had carved into its surface. The lines were rough, yet each stroke seemed to carry weight, as if the stone itself understood what was written upon it. Tears continued to slip down his face, falling freely, warm against the cold air, as his vision blurred. After a long, trembling breath, he closed his eyes and gave a weak nod. Even though they said nothing more, they remained there for another 5 minutes, standing silently before the makeshift tomb that now stood as the only marker of the dwarves' passing. If Ash's mind had been in its peak state, if the exhaustion had not hollowed him out so deeply, he might have tried to at least check another dwarven city, to see if there was an anomaly like this city. But right now, both Ray and Ash wanted nothing more than to close their eyes and rest. One might say their battles today had not lasted long, and perhaps that would be true from a third person's perspective. Yet the truth was different for them. The mental strain they had endured, the constant tension and the crushing weight of helplessness, was far more exhausting than anything physical. It drained not the body, but the spirit, leaving a heaviness that no sleep could fully ease. And then, without another word, Ash and Ray vanished, their forms dissolving into the air as they teleported away. When the space settled again, the silence lingered for a moment, until only a few minutes later, someone else appeared. Standing in front of the tomb was the Whisperer. What would you feel when, right in front of your eyes, people die? When someone you know dies, and you are powerless to do anything? You will curse yourself for being powerless. You will feel the boiling anger, the helpless frustration, and the kind of hatred that sits in your chest like a weight you can't breathe past. But what if that same person again sees people die in front of his eyes, and this time he has the power to save them, the strength in his hands, the means to change the outcome, yet still cannot use that power? It was that same suffocating powerlessness the Whisperer was experiencing. Being bound by the unyielding threads of fate, he could not intervene in worldly affairs. So he simply watched. He saw Ash and Ray fighting the hollow puppets, saw their blades cut through the dark, saw them finally strike down the Hollow Mother. They won in the end. They came so close they almost saved everyone. Almost. Until they all died. Until a loud, earth-shaking explosion consumed everything in a blinding instant. He witnessed it all, every scream and every moment as it unfolded before his eyes, and yet he could do nothing. He had followed Ash and Ray here not to fight, but to observe. He wanted to see how they would overcome odds that seemed impossible to defy. Overcome they did, but everything lost its meaning. He could have stepped forward after everything was over, could have faced them and spoken, but with what face would he appear? With what voice would he admit that he had known something was wrong, that the truth had been clear to him the moment he laid eyes on the creature? After Ash had asked his advice, the Whisperer had come here and studied the Hollow Mother from afar. He had peered deeper this time, learning more about its hidden abilities, about the strange forces it carried within. Yet even with this knowledge, he could not share it. And that was fate. It was fate that everyone died. It was fate that both Ash and Ray witnessed it with their own eyes. It was fate that Ash was fed up with incomplete information. That was how fate worked, seemingly mysterious, its true purpose unknown. Why what happened had to happen, even the Whisperer could not answer. How can these innocent souls affect the tapestry of fate? I cannot understand. In his long life he had never questioned fate. Never had he felt disgusted by it. But now in just few months, he had felt the weight of its restrictions, the invisible collar tightening around his neck, chained with links harder than diamond. He felt sorrow, he felt the ache of grief, yet no tears came. They had long dried. There was no water left in his withered body to weep with, not even enough to mourn. What an irony! That was the destiny of the silent observer, the one who sees all past, present, and future, yet is shackled by them in the end. Sighing, the Whisperer stood still. Ash and Ray had done what they could. Now it was his turn. And so, he waited, and waited. What would one expect from the dwarfs? After an explosion of such magnitude, anyone would think they would arrive in haste, their faces heavy with anger and grief, demanding answers, perhaps even growing suspicious of the other continents and preparing for war if guilt was found. At the very least, one would expect them to come and investigate, to uncover the cause of such devastation within their own continent. But no one came. Even though the Whisperer remained there for an entire day, watching the silent crater, gazing at nothing but the lonely stones standing in its center, not a single dwarf appeared. And the truth was, he knew why. He knew the reason no dwarf had set foot here. He knew, but he could never tell anyone. It was not absolute certainty, but he was almost sure, 90% at least. And now, seeing not a single dwarf arrive while others had, his suspicions felt all but confirmed. Humans had come, elves had come, wandering adventurers and the loose alliances of mercenaries had come. Even the distant information guilds, drawn by whispers of the event, had arrived to see for themselves. But after catching sight of the crater's vast scar upon the land and feeling the oppressive heaviness in the air, they did not dare come close. They lingered at a safe distance, observing from afar. Yet among them not a single dwarf. The reason was simple, and it lay in what he had glimpsed when he looked into the true nature of the Hollow Mother. The grotesque worm Ash and Ray had destroyed in the end. That was the real body of the creature. It had always been too fragile, too exposed, so it had grown a colossal, grotesque shell around itself, a stationary fortress to shield its vulnerable form. From there, the pieces of the puzzle fell neatly into place. Ash had destroyed the shell, and when the worm itself finally perished, the explosion occurred. The Hollow Mother, even in death, had chosen to take everyone with it. The Whisperer's mind also returned to an old memory, to the time when the mysterious masked man had slain the Hollow Mother effortlessly, back when the Whisperer was still young. The truth was simple enough, that man must have bypassed the monstrous shell entirely, striking directly at the small black worm hidden within. And then, just as before, everyone would have died. Yet one question lingered in the Whisperer's thoughts like a thorn that refused to be pulled. How had that man stopped the explosion? The answer to this question, he did not know. But what he did know was, the dwarf continent is finished. It has already been under the influence of the demons. For a very long time, the Whisperer thought in silence, his gaze heavy with the weight of certainty. The reason no dwarf had come was because they were all under the control of the Hollow Mother. Exactly, he suspected every city had a Hollow Mother of its own, and those Hollow Mothers were, at the end, being controlled by the Hollow Queen. In theory, that was what the Whisperer had pieced together. When he examined the body of the Hollow Mother, he could feel a faint but undeniable link between it and something far greater, something similar in essence but much larger and far more powerful. At first, it had been no more than a guess. But now, after seeing that no dwarf came to investigate, while humans, elves, and even members of wandering criminal organizations and information guilds had arrived to observe the crater from a safe distance, his uncertainty began to settle into certainty. Still, he could not claim to be entirely sure, so he decided to confirm it with his own eyes. He went to the nearest city and searched for the abomination. And what did he see? The Hollow Mother was present. Even though he looked directly at it, the monster could not see him. Being an observer, he could conceal himself so perfectly that no one, not even such a creature, could notice him. It was as if he had erased his very presence from the weave of fate itself. The process was different from Ash's absolute concealment, though perhaps it was similar in concept, only altered by his own connection to fate. After checking not one, not two, but 3 cities, he became certain there really was a Hollow Queen, and she was most likely in the central city. What a hard hurdle. Indeed, if the matter was not approached with care, millions would die just like before. Yet even though the Whisperer knew about it, he could not tell anyone. As long as something was related to Ray and Ash, except for a few certain matters, he could say nothing else to anyone. Not even to them. Then, how were they supposed to get the news? Ash will definitely come and check the other cities, and then he will also reach the same conclusion I have reached. But what would he even do against a Hollow Queen, about whom even the Whisperer himself did not know enough? Of course, the old man could go and study the Hollow Queen directly, but he did not wish to step into the central city yet. Not yet. What if he learned its abilities and whatever he could do right now also become restricted? It would be a tragedy. The only thing he could do was to make them strong. I need to train Ash. And Ray too. The old man was not eager to help Ray, but knowing that he was not bad at heart, and that in a previous fate it had been his actions that led to the world's destruction, the Whisperer had always carried a lingering sense of unease about him. But now that everything was shifting, and the future had become unpredictable, he decided it would be better if Ray's strength could be turned toward protecting the humans rather than destroying them. And just like that, the real training sessions for both Ash and Ray were set into motion. A week later, the news about the huge cavity on the surface of Ecumia brought every single person on the planet a wave of shock that spread like wildfire. The loud explosion that had shaken the air, the earthquake that was felt by countless people across different regions, and the strange disturbances in the mana of the atmosphere were things too large, too unnatural to be covered up or hidden. Questions began to rise like restless smoke, drifting into every corner of the world. Many theories were formed, each taking root in taverns, marketplaces, and private gatherings. The world was once again alive with speculation and gossip, like a fire crackling back to life. Some claimed that a saint had been provoked into anger by the dwarves and had unleashed a terrifyingly powerful attack. Others suggested it was the work of some shadowy criminal organization, or even the calculated strike of another continent seeking to send a warning. Yet the theory that held the most weight among the masses was that the dwarves themselves had been experimenting with some sort of secret weapon, a weapon that had catastrophically failed, leading to such a devastating explosion. But no matter the rumor, there was no clear answer from the dwarves. Neither a denial nor an admission came. Even when the Human Council and the Elven Council demanded an explanation, the Dwarf King merely gave the simple reply, "It was an unfortunate accident, and we are still investigating the cause." It was a shocker even for the councils, yet since the explosion had not taken place on their lands, there was little more they could do. Still, the silence of the dwarves did not put their minds at ease. The possibility of the dwarves possessing a weapon capable of producing such destruction hung over them like a heavy shadow, and the thought alone was enough to plant unease in the hearts of leaders. However, such worries belonged to the high seats of power, not to the ordinary folk. For the mundane humans, elves, and other races, there was nothing they could do except exchange rumors, share half-truths, and weave tales as the days passed. One way or another, the news reached every person, no matter how far they lived from the heart of Ecumia. It became a topic that lit every conversation, drawing curious glances and hushed voices. But, as with all things, time dulled the sharp edge of fear and excitement. A few days later, life began to move on. After a week, while some still brought it up in conversation, the news had lost its burning heat and became little more than lukewarm chatter. Meanwhile, somewhere deep within the grounds of Starlight Academy, something else was quietly taking shape. Clash! It's horrible. Leonard's voice cut through the air, cold and sharp, carrying a weight that could make the hairs on the back of the neck rise. His wooden sword moved with swift precision, intercepting an incoming strike from his opponent. The sharp impact rang through the training hall like a sudden crack of thunder. In the same motion, he twisted his hips, his legs snapping forward to deliver a kick aimed straight at Ash's stomach. Ash caught the blow with his free hand, bracing against the force. Without hesitation, he brought his wooden sword down toward Leonard's extended leg. But before it could connect, Leonard redirected the strike effortlessly, his body twisting midair as he shifted his weight, breaking free from Ash's hold with a movement so clean it seemed rehearsed 1,000 times. As soon as his feet touched the ground, Leonard's blade swept out in a fast, controlled arc, forcing Ash to duck. A few strands of Ash's hair drifted through the air, severed and falling softly to the floor. But the attacks did not end there. The moment Leonard's stance steadied, his body moved again like a sudden gust of wind. His sword stopped just a breath away from Ash's neck, the edge close enough for him to feel the faint brush of air. Ash gritted his teeth, his body tense, the situation pressing on him like a harsh reminder of his own limits. Is this the best you can do? Show me everything you have got. The challenge was still hanging in the air when Ash's expression shifted into calm neutrality. He adjusted his stance, his eyes steady, and then his sword exploded into a high-speed flurry of strikes. Leonard, however, simply stepped back, weaving away from every blow with practiced ease. His expression did not change, not even a flicker of excitement or struggle. None of the strikes reached him. They carried no real weight, no lethal intent, only raw strength shaped into the form of swordplay. When the attack made by Ash was stopped, Leonard let out a long, slow sigh, his eyes narrowing slightly. It's truly disheartening to see that, while being quite good in hand-to-hand combat and magic, you completely lack in swordsmanship. Who even taught you? I mean, didn't they at least teach you the basics? What do you mean by who taught me? I am self-taught, from magic to sword, though I did get some help in the initial stages of both. Ash's voice was calm, almost casual, but his words were nothing but the truth. Everything he knew about swordsmanship had been drawn from the game he once played, the very same game that had led to his transmigration into this novel world. Yet, to this day, he had found not even the faintest thread linking the VR game to the events of this reality. Still, his style with the sword was heavily influenced by what he had learned in that game. In the virtual world, simply thinking about a skill was enough for the character to execute it flawlessly. The same was true for sword techniques. For example, if there was a skill named Slash, performing it without using the skill would result in an ordinary cut. But activating the skill would produce a perfectly executed slash, enveloped in energy that boosted its power and increased the chances of a critical strike. So while Ash had focused mostly on normal, practical attacks within the game, he had carried over everything he knew into this world, believing his swordsmanship to be at least decent, if not impressive. Yet at this moment he felt, what was it exactly? Depressed? Or perhaps just plain stupid? Leonard's gaze lingered on him with quiet intensity. In truth, when the principal had asked Leonard to teach Ash the basics of swordsmanship, he had been surprised. No, Shocked was the better word. The principal's expression when making the request had carried the same reaction, as if the very idea had caught him off guard. That shock only grew when Leonard learned about Ash's unique class, one capable of wielding both magic and the sword. It was not something he had anticipated hearing, and it had taken him some time to accept it. If St. Nicole had not been so occupied with the constant dungeon outbreaks that had been plaguing the lands lately, Leonard was certain the man would have taken on the role of Ash's instructor himself. At first, Leonard assumed the principal's surprise was simply because of Ash's rare class, but the more he thought about it, the more he began to understand the real reason. This damn monster, who casts instant spells with more power than most mages could ever hope to muster, is self-taught in both magic and sword, and considering that fact alone, Leonard had to admit, Ash's swordsmanship was already impressive for someone without a mentor. He was not like Ray, whose monstrous talent allowed him to grasp 10 lessons after being taught one. But Ash was still a genius in his own right. Compared to Ray, however, he seemed to fall a little short. Still, what if this hard-working genius were given proper guidance? What if his raw effort was shaped, refined, and pushed forward with the right kind of teaching? That would be the birth of a true monster. Right now, Ash was wasting his potential. His swordplay lacked form, flowing in the wild, instinct-driven manner of a beast rather than a disciplined warrior. And because of that, he had no access to aura. "You need to start from scratch then," Leonard said in a stern tone. "All right," Ash agreed. That simple answer came as quite a shocker for Leonard. His expression faltered for a moment, the faintest crack in his composure, before he allowed a small smile to form. His retirement, which he had once thought would be a dull and uneventful phase of his life, was now slowly filling with a new flare of exciting moments, and this was one of them. Such moments brought him an unexpected but deeply satisfying feeling. Filled with curiosity and expectation, he asked, "Won't you complain that I am making you do this? That you already know everything about the sword? That it's just a waste of your time?" Ash remained silent for a second, gazing at Leonard with an absent-minded look. He thought quietly before speaking. "Why should I complain? I know I am weak, and if, to become strong, I have to start everything from scratch, then I would still do it." After a slight pause, he continued, "And I know nothing about the sword. I have learned that no one can know everything about anything, whether they are people, objects, or something else. So, yeah, I know amateur with swords, and I would like to master mine. Will you teach me, Instructor Leonard?" Ash asked this while bowing his head. His expression stayed neutral, but behind that calm facade was a storm of hidden feelings. Even though his mind was kept orderly by the soul library, his body betrayed him. It showed the symptoms of trauma and anxiety. He despised those signs of weakness, so he filled his days completely, pushing himself to the limit without giving his body even the smallest moment of rest, afraid that in stillness, he might unconsciously do something reckless. Because of this, he had barely spent any meaningful time with Alicia. Somewhere along the way, he had started to find it hard to be open with her. The courage to say what he felt, to allow his emotions to flow freely, had begun to slip away from him. He did not fully understand why this was happening, or perhaps deep down he did. Maybe his mind had long ago built a shield to protect itself, a wall that caged everything inside him after Alicia's death in his previous life. That same wall, which had once been his protection, had now turned into an obstacle that would not allow him to become truly open with anyone. And that made him feel pathetic. To be honest, he was pathetic. Leonard scoffed internally. If you are weak, then what does that make the other students? The weakest of the weak. But still, he understood how Ash felt. Or maybe he didn't. "Even if you hadn't asked me, I would have still taught you about swords anyway," Leonard replied with a faint smile, his tone carrying a quiet certainty. Ash gave a small nod of thanks before turning to leave. The real training would start soon, but Leonard still needed to make some preparations, which meant Ash had an hour or two of free time. Free time, however, was something Ash didn't want. Being idle left too much space for unwanted thoughts, so he decided to continue exercising even now. The semester exams were drawing close, their shadow looming over the academy, but to be honest, Ash had no interest in them. He barely even cared about attending the academy itself, yet he still went every day, as if pulled by an unseen string. Why do I feel like I'm forgetting something? The thought lingered for only a moment before it was pushed aside. The steady rhythm of training, the pressure in his muscles, the pounding of his heart, all of it slowly washed away the noise in his head until his mind felt clear again.